Otherwise, I want to welcome everybody. Thanks for coming. I haven't done one of these 2.5 day workshops in quite a while. I shouldn't say I haven't done one that wasn't, let's say, marketed to the general public. I've done many that are for, trading companies and brokerage firms. One of the reasons why I like the idea of videoing this is because I don't really plan on doing this maybe again for a while. There's other areas that I want to move off into, mostly just to concentrate on my own trading. And so having this videotape will make it easy for me to just direct somebody to this. In other words, they call, they want a workshop, and I say, "Hey, that's great. Get the video, and you'll get what you need." And speaking of getting what you need, I want you guys to first of all understand or know that there's plenty of time built in to this or to answer your questions. So I am encouraging you to make comments and to ask questions. As a matter of fact, I mean, I'm looking at this as a creative experience in the way that all of you came here for a specific reason, maybe many reasons. You have your own purposes for being here. I presume, based on how the workshop was marketed in the first place, that your primary consideration or primary purpose for being here is to create greater degrees of consistency with your trading. This is what this workshop is all about. It's about creating consistency. And as all of you well know, that's not an easy task or what we've chosen to do. I think all of you also probably know, and I don't know what the experience level is of this group. I mean, I know some of the people in this group have been in the business for a long time. There's other people that I've never met before. But I assume that all of you have experienced what I'm going to call this kind of reality gap between what you realize as being possible from the market. In other words, what we're looking at is this kind of unlimited potential to, let's say, enrich ourselves, and the difference between what we can perceive and see as unlimited potential to enrich ourselves and what we end up with on our bottom line. And there could be a huge gap there. And so what I'm going to do in the next 2.5 days, and it will go very fast, it really will. But what I'm going to do in the next 2.5 days is give you a very detailed and comprehensive blueprint on how to close that gap. At the same time, I want you to keep something in mind, that because you're here and because you're exposing yourself to this information, it doesn't necessarily mean that you have to utilize it or utilize it right away. You may find that a lot of the stuff that you're going to hear in the next 2.5 days, you might not really want to act on or do anything about for quite a while. And like an example I can give you in my own personal life is that there are many times that I felt compelled to buy books and just skim them a little bit, see the potential that may be in that book, and yet not be ready to read it for several years later. That's happened many times in my life. And when the time was right, it's like I found myself reaching for that particular book and got into it and stayed into it until I gleaned whatever it is that was in it that I needed out of it. And you might find that to be the case with this workshop. So just keep that in mind, that you don't, just because of something that you're going to hear this weekend that may excite you even, because there can be a huge gap between what we desire and what we're capable of manifesting for ourselves. And that's basically what this really is all about. And it may take years. And I guess the way I like to describe that particular, I guess when I say it may take years, it's what I call psychological distance. Psychological distance is very abstract and it's extremely difficult to measure. Meaning that if there is an ideal mindset that we're going to talk about, that this is the blueprint I'm going to give you. There's an ideal mindset for creating consistent results as a trader. That's our goal, let's say. Our goal is to get to that ideal mindset right here, okay? And what am I, and even when I say consistency, what am I talking about? Am I talking about never having a loss again? What? No, apparently, no, I'm not talking about never having a loss again. But I am talking about an equity curve that basically, that you get this nice gentle rise, or even, let's put it this way, a nice slope on an equity curve that doesn't reflect trading errors. We're going to have losses. But that's a lot different than an equity curve that looks something like this. Okay? And then you work on it a little bit more, and you got one of these again. These kinds of huge dips or drop-offs in our equity curve are always going to be the result of trading errors of one type or another. I know it's very easy to say, no, it was the market conditions that did this to me. But if you investigate these situations much closer, you're going to find that they're always going to be the result of a trading error of some sort. If we just eliminated our trading errors from our trading, probably with the kind of experience levels that exist in this group, and what I mean by experience levels are just your ability to read the markets, your ability to identify an edge. I would bet that if you went back and really truly scrutinized your trades and eliminated, or had a way of at least having, let's say, having the kind of diary or information about your trades where you could go back and say, you know what, if I didn't make this error, this error, this error, and this error, instead of my equity curve looking like this, it would look like that. Now, there is an ideal mindset to create this. This is the blueprint I'm going to give you. I'm going to give you a blueprint for that ideal mindset. What we're talking about, the problem here is that we're talking about psychology. We're talking about mental makeup. These are not things that we typically grow up learning how to work with. We don't go through grade school getting psychology courses. We don't even really get, probably good psychology. Maybe today the kids in high school might. I don't really know. I didn't in high school. And I don't even think the psychology courses in many colleges are probably that good, because they're perpetuating what people did 100 years ago instead of really, in many cases, being creative and finding things that really work today. So since we're talking about our mental makeup, we're going to have to learn some skills. We're going to have to learn skills to bridge, let's say, this gap between, let's see, where someone might be here and this distance, this psychological, let's say, this is the psychological distance to this particular mindset that they're trying to acquire. In essence, they're saying, I need to reinvent myself in some ways. Now, what does that distance mean? Well, it's very abstract. There's really no way to say that it has anything to do with linear inches or centimeters or whatever. It's more, I would say it's more like software code. It would be saying, like, if I had a software program that consisted of 1 million lines of code, and that code was virtually perfect, except that it had one period out of place in one line, and that particular software program ran perfectly under virtually all circumstances except one particular circumstance in which that one period that's out of place caused the whole thing to shut down and cause a catastrophic shutdown. Okay? Now, you could say, if you want to equate this psychological distance, you could say that what's the distance between, let's say, where that person's at and the ideal or most perfect mindset? Just one period away, right? The problem is finding that particular line, and knowing how to fix the error. It would be, there's another analogy where that I read many years ago. I don't remember what book it was in, but there was something wrong with the plumbing in a hospital. Okay, and so the hospital called the plumber. And the plumber went down to the basement of the hospital, and he's looking at virtually acres of pipes. And he's walking, he's touring the bottom of the hospital, and he's looking around, and he takes out his wrench from his, from his belt, and he starts, tapping on a valve here and tapping on a valve there, and he thinks about it a little bit, and then all of a sudden he takes his one valve and he just gives it a whack, and everything runs perfectly. So went back, sent the hospital a bill, and he sent him a bill for $1,000. The hospital administrator called him up and said, "Hey, what's going on? You're only down here for a half an hour, and I saw you. You took a wrench out of your belt, and you wrapped, you whacked this one valve, and everything ran perfectly. I mean, come on, $1,000." He said, "Okay, I'll revise the bill." So he sent him a revised bill. Yeah, no, $10 for whacking the valve, $990 for knowing where to whack. Mhm. Okay, what we're dealing with here is a lot like that. There could be a person in this room, and I know Jake's hoping he's that person, but there could be a person in this room who's only one period away, just one flaw away from that ideal mindset. But finding the flaw and fixing the flaw could take a long time in terms of the kind of expertise that you may need to acquire to be able to do it. Just because you have to get used to working inside your own mental environment. It doesn't have to be hard. It really doesn't. And there are things that we're going to talk about and techniques that I'm going to give you that make it as easy as possible. Most of it just has to do with your willingness. Most of the reason why people are even willing to come to a workshop like this is because of the extreme frustration that they experience between that reality gap that I mentioned a little while ago. That reality gap of, I know these unlimited riches are available. They're possible. They're here. I smell it. I taste it. So I'm so close to it most of the time. But I still can't get it, I still can't bridge that gap between what I know is there and the reality of the bottom line of my statement. So I am assuming that's why you're here. Did I assume correctly? Everyone's here for the same reason then, right? Right. So if you've got questions, I want you to ask those questions. If you've got comments, I want you to make the comments. There's just one thing that I ask of you, and that if I'm on a roll delivering material, just wait until I'm done and then ask the question. Because a lot of times, once I get on a roll delivering material, and if you break my train of thought, and sometimes it's really difficult to get back to where it was. And the other thing too is that when we take breaks, let's break. Okay, let's take a break. Don't ask me your question on the break. One, because we're taking a break because I need the break. Number one. Okay. Number two, most of the time, people ask the best questions during lunches and during breaks. They make the best comments during lunches and during breaks. And so what I wish that you do is save it and share it with the rest of the group and share it with the people who are going to be watching this video. Because I'm sure that we've got, a relatively good cross section of people, and your questions are probably going to be the same kind of questions that people, are going to be asking about how to get through this material and how to understand it. And so not only will you be doing yourself a favor, but you'll be doing them a favor too. Go ahead. Well, I can't see your name.
John Deck.
John, you don't have to give me, that's all right. Okay, John, go ahead.
You find going to the hospital for that training in that training salary that outside of training.
I'm not sure if I know what you mean by outside of a trading environment. What do you mean? Oh, absolutely. Sure. Yes. As a matter of fact, that's what you're going to find anyway. you're going to find that when it comes to creating consistency, it really has to do with how you live your life. It has virtually, I haven't met anybody yet, and I'm not saying this kind of a person doesn't exist. I've met people who are close to it. I don't know, I can't tell you how many traders I've actually worked with as a trading coach, and I started doing this in 1982. And back then, I was mostly working with floor traders in Chicago. I was hired by clearing firms to clearing firms to work with their floor traders. I mean, these are guys that traded in the in the grain pits and the T-bond pits and in the S&P pits and the meat pits at the Chicago Board of Trade, Chicago Mercantile Exchange. They trade for their own accounts. And what would happen, especially back in the 80s when things were a lot looser back then, it's not like what it is today. Well, a lot of these clearing firms were like families. And since these guys were trading their own accounts, if they went debit, the people that own the clearing firms would usually carry them. So they'd let them carry a $50,000 or $100,000 debit, and the guy would work the debit off, and he might get profitable and then go debit again, and that's basically the way the cycle ran until I kind of came along, and they found out about me and they hired me to help these guys work their way out of their debits and to stay out of their debits, and that way everyone was benefited because not only the trader but the clearing firm theoretically had less risk. So I've worked with a lot of traders. I have yet to really meet somebody who had the kind of, let's say, mind that was so compartmentalized, that was so divided, that under, let's say, probably the psychiatric industry would call like maybe a true schizophrenic, where they were so compartmentalized that what they did in their personal life didn't affect their trading. Did you get what I just said? That what they did in their personal life did not affect their trading. And it always astounded me, as a matter of fact. What really astounded me was how many traders didn't think that there was a connection. I mean, it just amazed me, working with these guys who would literally, walk out the front door, be screaming at their wife and their kids, kick the dog, you know, and go down to the pit and have their worst day, in a year or whatever. It just and they didn't make the connection, it was bizarre. To me, it was so obvious that, but it wasn't to them. And that's one of the things I help them do is make that kind of connection. So a lot of what you're going to find that it takes to just create consistency is developing an increased awareness, of what you're thinking in any given moment, and having a way to gauge your state of mind. Having a way to gauge your state of mind so that if you're in the best state of mind to be trading in any given moment or any given day or any given hour. Because if you had a way to gauge that, and let's say you weren't addicted to trading in ways that would prevent you from not trading, put it that way, not trading, because in many cases you're going to find that not trading is like putting money in the bank. Literally, I'll say this again. Not trading is like putting money in the bank, because there will be times that you will be in a state of mind that I could virtually guarantee that no matter what your system, no matter what your methodology says, no matter what your system says, it won't make any difference. You will lose money. You can recognize these kinds of states of mind in advance. And that's one of the things you're going to learn how to do this weekend. Or at least I'm going to give you the tools to learn how to do it. And like I said, if you're not addicted to trading in ways that would prevent you from not trading, then what you do is just not trade. And you're making money. You're not trading and you're making money.
That's one of the problems also. Overtrade. Oh yes.
Yeah, exactly. Right. Did everybody hear? Did you guys hear that on the tape? That was one of the problems with overtrading, where there's no action, you're trying to force a trade. See, there are, and I'm sorry, I can't see your name. You don't have your John, another John. Okay. Yeah, John. See, there is a way that you can learn to recognize when you're forcing a trade. Instead of after the fact, you can learn to recognize it before the fact. But the problem again is that there may be, if you're, let's say, if you have a tendency to overtrade, your tendency to overtrade may have something to do with some other aspect of your life that really doesn't have anything to do with trading at all. And so when I made the comment earlier about what consistency really consists of, I mean, there's again, there's the underlying principles that you're going to have to integrate into your mind so that you can create those kind of consistent results. But in essence, it really boils down to how you live your life. And what the interesting part about all this, so this is the great part, okay? Not the great part. The interesting part is that you don't have to, all this stuff that we're going to learn in the next 2.5 days, all this stuff that we're going to go through, you don't have to know any of it to put on a winning trade. Do you? Absolutely none of it. None. Zero. You can make all the mistakes in the world from, let's say, from the things that we're going to learn and talk about, we would categorize as a mistake. And you know what? You can do it and it can still turn out to be a winning trade, right? That's the problem. See, the problem is, and that's the problem with doing this work, that this work can be difficult. And you're just always one trade away, winning trade away of convincing yourself that you don't have to do it. That's right. That's right. You can be making every mistake in the book and still be winning. You don't have to know anything about yourself. You don't have to know anything even about the markets to put on a winning trade. I've worked with many traders who started their trading career, and when I say they knew nothing, I literally mean they knew nothing. It just so happened that the first trade they put on was a winner. They said, okay, I'm going to buy. And it went up. And they had I've seen streaks of 15, 16 winning trades in a row from people who knew nothing. Now, you can put on one trade and not know anything. You can put on two, you can put on three, but eventually the streak's going to end. And we know that it's going to end. Is because eventually what's going to happen is that person's going to make an error. Generally, it's going to be a money management error, meaning that if I'm on a winning streak, I'm going to get to the point where I think I'm invincible. And as a result, instead of trading, let's say 1,000 shares, well, next time I decide to trade, I'll put on 10,000 shares. And now if the market just even goes against me a little bit, a tiny, tiny bit, I can go into a state of mind freeze, which is something I've never experienced, right? And all of a sudden, whack, wham, I'm totally paralyzed because this is just something I didn't anticipate or expect, and then lose a ton of money. And then say, well, okay, well, gee, if I could make money and I didn't know anything, just think about, well, if I learned something about the market, how much money I could make. And so I start buying books, I start buying trading systems, start going to seminars, trying to learn all about the market. In essence, trying to learn about the market in a way that would keep that from happening again, when it never had anything to do with the market in the first place, ever. And that's what's really frustrating about all this, is that's why you see people who are absolutely wonderful analysts that can literally call market moves with uncanny accuracy, but make the absolute worst traders imaginable. So that was kind of just the beginning housekeeping stuff, okay? Just that I want to encourage you guys to ask questions, because your questions are going to shape this experience. It really is. It's your questions and comments that are going to shape this. And like I said, we've got a ton of material to get through. I've got this organized, or let's say structured in a way where we will get through all the material no matter what. That's why I usually start on a Friday night and go for 2.5 or 3 hours just to make sure, because sometimes it can get a little tight on Sunday afternoons if I didn't do the Friday night thing. And again, depending on how many questions people have and how much they participate. But I do encourage it. But like I said, if I'm on a roll and you want to just wait until after that's over with, that I would appreciate. So anybody have any questions right now? We're all set? Okay. So basically what I've kind of done is boiled trading down. By the way, guys, can I walk back there? Can I walk?
Yes.
Okay. How far can I walk? You tell me.
You're still good.
Tell me.
That doesn't look that great.
No? Okay. So
No, that's good.
about right here, right?
Well, when you get in front of the projector, it's not good.
Okay. Right about from here to here then?
Yeah.
Okay.
So you can keep going to the right as far as you want.
Oh, okay, good. Like about right here.
Yeah, you're left.
Okay. Thank you. Yeah, see, the other thing about the other room is that I wouldn't have these bright lights in my eyes because they had higher ceilings, but I wanted you guys to have these good chairs. I really did. Yeah, it really does. It makes a huge difference. So I just, I thought, okay, I'll put up with the lights. They get the chairs because they won't move the chairs. I mean, these chairs belong in this room. That's it. Okay. And all the hotels are like that. We've run this kind of crap all the time. Anyway, so okay. So pretty much I boiled or kind of distilled trading down into 4 general skill sets that you have to acquire to be a consistently successful trader. First of all, you have to know how to identify an edge, don't you? Go ahead, John.
Where are we from here?
Yeah, I'm in the introduction right now, and I will follow the presentation. Will follow. We just put this up there so they could, we're not here yet, okay? So don't worry about that. However, I don't know if we should take a few minutes or not, even before I get going. Do you guys want to do that? There's only 13 questions on that attitude survey. If you guys want to take about 5 minutes to do that, just right in the beginning, right in the beginning of the book, introduction. Yeah. Yeah, attitude survey, right. Oh, second section. Sorry. New workbook. And so what I've done is basically I've broken it down into 4 general categories of skill sets. The first is learning to identify an edge. And that's the easiest part of this whole process of becoming a consistently successful trader, and therefore the one that most people gravitate towards. Meaning they'll spend most of their time learning how to do that, as opposed to the next skill set, which is probably the most important, if not the most important, and that's learning how to think in the market's perspective, or learning how to think in probabilities. And I would say that there isn't anyone in this room that doesn't understand the nature of probabilities. And I've worked with people who have who've even majored or have degrees in probabilities from college, and yet they still don't know how to think in probabilities. Because when you can think in probabilities, you will automatically stop making the kind of errors that will detract from your ability to be consistent. In other words, when you've effectively learned how to think in probabilities, it won't even occur to you not to predefine your risk. It won't occur to you not to cut your losses. It won't occur to you to even hesitate when your edge roll, whatever you define or whatever criteria you use to define an edge, shows up in the market. It won't even occur to you to jump the gun. It won't occur to you not to take profits or have a systematic way of taking profits. These things just will not happen, because when you have effectively integrated into your mindset this ability to think in probabilities, it is completely inconsistent to do these things with this thinking methodology. The two are completely inconsistent with each other. This mindset won't let you behave that way. And that's basically where we're going to get to in this workshop. But there are other problems. There are other areas. The next area, so we've got defining an edge, learning how to think in the market's perspective, and then the third one is learning how to identify and neutralize self-sabotaging beliefs. This is big. Here's the problem. The market represents an unlimited, literally unlimited opportunity to enrich ourselves. We all see it. It's there. It really is unlimited. Maybe there are some practical limitations, but for the most part, it's pretty unlimited. But that doesn't mean that the kind of things that we've accumulated, meaning the kind of beliefs that we've accumulated throughout our lives that exist in our mental environment, are in complete harmony with our desire to create consistent results, or to tap into, let's say, that unlimited ability to enrich ourselves. In other words, not everything that we've learned would argue for increase or vast riches or prosperity. Not only would it not argue for, it might argue completely against. These are things that we might be conscious of. In many cases, they are beliefs that we are not conscious of at all. But what we're going to learn tomorrow is that just because we're not conscious of something that we've learned at some point in our lives, it doesn't mean that it's not operational. It doesn't mean that it still doesn't have an effect on the way we perceive information and how we behave. And this, this is the area, learning to identify and neutralize self-sabotaging beliefs is an area that can take quite a bit of time to master. Can take quite a bit of expertise, as a matter of fact. Now, you might be saying to yourself, does that mean that what you're saying to me is that I really have to, kind of tear apart my identity or personality to be a consistently successful trader? No, you do not. You don't have to go through that process. But if you choose not to go through that process, then you're going to have to do something to compensate for it. You can create consistency without having to go through and identify every belief that might argue against increased prosperity or being, accumulating more and more money as a trader, put it that way. But if you don't, and these kind of beliefs do exist, you will have to adopt a trading regimen that compensates. And we'll talk more about that later on Sunday. Are you guys kind of with me on this stuff? Okay. And then the next area, the fourth area, is euphoria. Euphoria is big. Euphoria is big. Now, just briefly, euphoria. Euphoria, let's say, we know there's probably many ways that we can describe euphoria. The easiest way for me to describe it would be it's a riskless state of mind. So think about that. It is a state of mind in which we have no ability to perceive risk. Okay? In a state of euphoria, nothing can go wrong as far as we're concerned. Nothing. Now think about the implications of that word. Nothing can go wrong. Nothing. However, we all know the market may not agree with that. What? Yeah. And the problem is that when you're in a state of euphoria, certainly it's the least likely, it's virtually impossible to set any limitations on your behavior. Everyone seems, at least from my experience, everyone seems to have a different threshold for entering into that state of euphoria. And there is a threshold there. It's like there's definitely a difference between confidence and euphoria. Okay? There's a threshold. Well, what's that? Confidence. What? Yeah, that's spelled it right, didn't it?
Yeah, it's trader.
I'm not a good speller, so you can get me on this real easily. Anyway, there's a there's definitely a threshold. I've worked with traders who can flip into a state of euphoria on first winning trade. Really. For most people, it takes more than just one winning trade. However, like I said, once you flip into that state of mind, and it is chemically based. I mean, scientists have found that the chemicals that are in our brain when we're in a state of euphoria are very different than the kind of endorphins that are, or not different. It's just that you've got an increased level of endorphins, I guess, that are flowing through your brain that cause you not to be able to perceive risk. And so what you're going to have to do again is develop or institute a trading regimen that compensates for this. Meaning that you have to be able to recognize when you have flipped into a state of euphoria, and then what's even more important, be able to stop trading. Stop trading. I don't know of any other way to handle it. I really don't. After all these years of doing this and thinking about it, I mean, euphoria is a great place to be. There isn't any other state of mind that would be, let's say, that would be better than being in a state of euphoria. You just don't want to necessarily be in a state of euphoria while you're trading. Because the tendency would be to overtrade. It would be almost impossible to keep yourself from putting on a much larger position than what your money management, let's say, whatever money management guidelines you use, or whatever money management guidelines would call for in your particular situation. And if you do, and then of course, as your size increases, then the market just, the amount of distance the market has to move against you to cause you to flip in from euphoria into complete terror or mind freeze is just very tiny. So you go from heaven, the virtual, in a state of mind that's heaven, to hell in one instance, just by having the market move a few ticks against you. And the problem is that this can create an enormous amount of psychological damage that's really hard to recover from. It's extremely difficult to recover. Not that it can't be done, but see, the way most people look at this, most people look at this as like a supreme betrayal. It goes into a category in their mind where they were betrayed. And some people would even say that they were betrayed by God, or even think that. It's very possible for people to think that. It can really be damaging. You kind of all looking at me like, okay, what do we do now? So I'm going to give you a framework to be able to recognize this. And when you think about this, if your objective, if what you're saying to yourself or me or whatever by being here is that my objective is to create consistent results, that depending on how strong that desire really is, will in essence be part of the tools that you will use to be able to recognize when you have actually flipped into that state of euphoria and say to yourself, you know what? I'm going to enjoy myself and the money that I've made getting there some other way other than trading. I'm going to stay in that state of mind, but I'm just going to be doing it with my friends or my family or my kids or whatever. Or maybe you guys are all looking at me like, know really what I'm talking about. So what we're going to focus on in this workshop is we're going to focus on those last three skill sets. Okay, the question is there a psychological profile that would suggest that you shouldn't be a trader? Um, well, when you say psychological profile, I guess you're going to have to be more specific. Do you mean personality types? Yeah. See, the problem with me answering that particular question is that I've never looked at personality types as being relevant. I don't see. To me, personality. When psychologists categorize people in personality types, to me it was like what they're doing is just making their job easier. They kind of pigeonhole people and sort of pigeonhole people into certain categories, so that they don't really have to think about what it is that they need to do to help this person. So I've never really categorized anything in personality types at all. I categorize everything in terms of what people believe because of the way that I think and the way I've developed this material. What we believe determines how we perceive information and how we behave, the decisions we make, how we feel about the results, and it doesn't really matter what kind of personality type that psychologists would say that you have anyway. But are there people, for example, maybe to answer your question, are there people that I've met that seem to be more predisposed to being successful as opposed to, say, people that I've met that are predisposed to not being successful? Sure. People who are really rigid in their thinking, really black and white, are, they have, just have difficulty in terms of flexibility, are, let's say, predisposed to not being able to think of probabilities very well. When people who are, let's say, predisposed to make money are those people who don't give a shit about money. In other words, some of the best floor traders that I've ever worked with are floor traders that it's just a game. The money is virtually irrelevant. And so when they put on trades and they put on the kind of size that they're putting on, it isn't, they don't think about it, let's say, the way that a normal person thinks about it. What's that? That's right. I was going to say that. And they love it. Yes, absolutely. Because when you really get right down to it, you really got to love this. You really have to love it. People who are also predisposed to being successful are people who genuinely enjoy this and enjoy it in a way where they're not necessarily addicted to it. There's a difference. Because when we talk about addictions, what we're really saying is that whenever we're operating out of an addiction, we're operating out of a state of choicelessness. All addictions create choicelessness, not choice, but choicelessness. All addictions, when we're operating out of an addiction, we're operating out of choicelessness. In other words, the addiction will dictate how we see things and how we behave. And as traders, we have to be supremely flexible in terms of what we can do or not do. In other words, we always have to be acting in our own best interest at all times. And addictions will definitely cause us not to act in our own best interest at all times, because we'll have to satisfy the addiction. What we might have to do to be acting in our own best interest could be diametrically opposed to what our addiction says we have to do. That's what I'm saying. And so what's going to win is our addiction. So what we're talking about is really is thinking patterns that are, let's say, extremely flexible, and not caring about money, and not caring about losing. Because what we're talking about is developing a carefree state of mind. Carefree state of mind with the kind of psychological resources where we're still at the same time always acting in our own best interest. So in other words, can I interact with the market in a way where I don't need to use fear? Think about this. I do not need to use fear to limit my behavior. Because that's the way it is with most traders. They have to use their fear of the market or their fear of what could happen to limit themselves. And that's exactly what we want to eliminate. Is this ideal mindset that we're talking about doesn't have any fear. There's no fear of the market at all, because it's really not the market anyway, it's ourselves. The reason why we fear the market is because we can't trust ourselves. Any fear that we have of the market is just simply a reflection of the fact that we can't trust ourselves. We can't trust ourselves to do what we need to do when we need to do it without hesitation, or without reservation, or internal conflict or argument. Does that make sense to everybody? Okay, so I said before, we got those four broad skill sets, and so what we're going to do is we're going to focus in on the last three: learning how to think in probabilities, learning how to identify and neutralize self-sabotaging beliefs, and setting up a regimen so that you can recognize when you flipped into a state of euphoria. Now, and we're going to do this all within the context of the three developmental stages of a trader: trading mechanically, trading subjectively, and trading intuitively. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take all this information that we're going to go through tonight, all day tomorrow, and then part of the afternoon on Sunday, or part of the morning on Sunday. And I'm going to put it all within this context. I'm going to put it all together within this context of trading mechanically, subjective, and intuitively. And the reason why I do it this way is because, again, I don't have a profile of people who attend this workshop, and I've gotten people who are novices all the way to people. The biggest trader I had was somebody that had $1 billion under management. And so, everyone's at different levels of development in terms of what they need. And so there may be traders, there may be people in this room that are, let's say, at a point where they can trade subjectively and are now, getting, say, a high volume of intuitive impulses about the nature of what the market's going to do. And so what I do is give you these skill sets for each one of these levels of development, or these skills within each of those levels of development. Chances are, however, if you haven't completely learned how to think in probabilities, you're going to end up in the mechanical state of trading, regardless of how many years you've been doing this. And the reason why is because I'm going to teach you how to use the mechanical stage of trading to actually integrate all the principles of what it means to think in probabilities into your mental environment in a way where it becomes who you are, so that you no longer can make any trading errors. Or it virtually becomes impossible to make a trading error. And I really mean that. It becomes impossible to make a trading error. It's just not part of your identity. It's not part of who you are. Okay. What's that?
Yeah.
You mean financially? Oh,
The investment
oh,
you're applying it mechanical kind of room use those investment wise.
no, I'm not saying that you're trying to accomplish. I'm not saying that you have to try to do anything in terms of subjectively or intuitively. All I'm saying is that I will teach you how to use the mechanical stage of trading to integrate all the trading skills, mental skills that you need so that you can become consistent, whether it's trading mechanically, subjective, or intuitively. I'm just saying we're going to look at trading in a very different way. We're going to look at trading in a way like, how am I going to use my trading and what I've learned about how to identify an edge to actually create certain skills inside my mental environment? That's what I'm saying. And then once those skills are set, then you can do anything you want. You want to trade subjectively and you want to trade intuitively, then you can do that. But there are some constraints there, because remember when I said if you don't want to get into identifying and neutralizing self-sabotaging beliefs, well, when you start trading subjectively, a lot of those things start making a lot of money. A lot of those beliefs, if they exist, will start working on the way you see the market and how you behave, and therefore one of the compensating factors is to go back and trade mechanically. And I'll explain all that tomorrow. That'll be. What does it mean to think in probabilities? To really learn or understand what it means to think in probabilities, we really have to get at the very core or the very foundation of what makes prices move. This is really critical. And what amazes me is how many times, I've over the years I've done these kind of presentations, especially in huge conferences, where people have traded and they've been trading for a long time and they really don't understand what makes prices move. At the very fundamental reasons why prices go from one price to another, and it's of paramount importance. Not only, like I said, as a foundation for learning how to think in probabilities, but also for learning how to read the markets. So, for an example, if we've got 12, 11, 10, 9, 08, and the last price was 10, what does that mean, first of all? When the last price is 10, what does exactly that mean? Yeah, that's fair value, right? In other words, it's what someone's willing to pay and what someone's willing to sell for and what someone's willing to buy for. Now, if you look at trading, when anybody puts on the trade, no matter what kind of trade it is, there are only two outcomes to every trade, are there not? Right? I need you guys to nod your head, okay? At least tell me that you're with me on this, okay? There's only two outcomes to every trade. What is it? What are those two outcomes? It's going to be a winner or a loser. So every trade that we put on has only two possible outcomes. Well, it could be break. But how long is it going to stay break even? No, that's not what I'm saying. You could put on a trade at 10. How long is the market going to stay at 10? Okay, that's what I'm getting at. And all I'm saying is that yes, you can scratch trades, but look, as of yet, I have not met somebody. Well, let's put it this way: and everyone trades. We only got two outcomes to every trade, and everyone trades for the exact same reason. And what is that reason? To make money, right? And I have yet to meet somebody that actually consciously put on a trade before they put it on, thinking it was going to be a loser. I have not met that person yet. Now, I'm not saying subconsciously they didn't hope that it was a loser for some reason or another, but at least consciously, everyone trades for the exact same reason. Now, so we've got everyone trading for the exact same reason. We've only got two outcomes to every trade that you put on. It's either going to be a winner or a loser, and there are only two ways to make money. You have to buy something low and sell it back at a higher price, or sell something high and buy it back at a lower price. Those are the only two ways that you can make money. Now, if that's the case, and the last price of something was 10, where everyone agreed, at least in that moment, two traders or more agreed on the value of something, what is going to cause the price to go to 11 or down to 9? Okay, you say an imbalance. That is correct. That's right. Okay, that is absolutely correct. But let's be a little bit more detailed here. Well, okay, you could. I'm not going to argue with that, but that's not the answer I'm looking for.
Buyers.
That's not the answer I'm looking for either. Perceived value, yes. Okay, that's close. That's what? Look at it this way, guys. Okay, if for someone, if the last price of something was 10, for the price to go to 11, it means you've got a buyer and a seller, right? You've got someone who sold it at 10 and someone who's willing to buy it at 10. Now, someone who was willing to buy it at 10 is doing the exact opposite of what they need to do to make money relative to the last price. Now, think about this for a second. The last price was 10. Low, if I've got to buy low and sell high, or sell high and buy low, low is 9. The last price was 10. Low is 9 relative to the last price. If I'm willing to buy at 10, what does that say about what I think that where prices are going to go? What? Yeah. Yeah, we say perceived value, exactly. In other words, let's look at it like a football game, a basketball game, a prize fight, or whatever. We look at everyone talks about, let's say, the word momentum. Who's got the momentum on their side? If you take these two traders, the guy that's selling it at 11 is doing exactly what he thinks he needs to do to make money. He is selling high relative to the last price. He is being passive. This is what's critical. He's being passive. Remember that everyone trades for the same reason. Go ahead.
Why is the person selling?
Well, let's put it this way. I'm not saying that the seller has less of a conviction. He could have a very strong conviction and think he's got a deal, right? All I'm saying is that we can say, and that could be really be the case, and that kind of conviction can stop prices on a dime, can it? Okay, so that could be a reversal right there. All I'm saying, David, is that if you look at these two people, you could say that the guy that's willing to step out and step up and bid a price up would, let's say, you're right, he doesn't have to have a strong conviction, but for prices to keep on moving up, then we'd have to say that the buyers have a stronger conviction than the sellers. They have to, because they're willing, because one, not only are they willing to bid the price up, but that the conviction itself might not be as strong in this case. There might just be more buyers than sellers. So it's a combination of two things. It could be either there's a stronger conviction or there's more buyers and there's not enough sellers to absorb the buyer's orders, right? And if there's another one at the point at which there's enough sellers that come into the market to absorb all the buy orders, then what's going to happen to price? It's going to reverse. So it could be a combination of two factors. It could be just numbers or conviction itself. But to make the point, what I do is I just usually say conviction, because really all price movement is a function of what people believe about the future. That we can say for sure. There's only two ways to make money. You have to buy low and sell high and buy low. And for the price to go from the last price to this price, someone has to be willing to step out and bid it up and pay more than, do the exact opposite. That's the important part. That's why I say more conviction, because he has to do the opposite of what he needs to do to make money. If I'm only doing this to make money and I've got to do something that's opposite relative to the last price, then that is an indication, okay, that, let's say, that's an indication that there must be more conviction, at least in that moment, probably. What's that? Okay. Okay, so what we have is we have now a group of people that are trading with one another. And as a result, this collective group of, now we look at it from a collective level, this group of people that are all acting, let's say, in their own self-interest, trying to make money for whatever reason, by bidding prices up or offering them lower, they create behavior patterns. They create group collective behavior patterns. Just the same way individuals will act the same way under certain circumstances over and over again, groups of individuals will act in ways, or let's say characteristic ways, over and over again. And so what technical analysis does is basically identify these patterns for us. So we can use any number of tools that we've learned. We can use trend lines. We can use, moving averages, Fibonacci relationships, stochastics, all these technical tools that we've learned about, all they really do is categorize and organize group human behavior in a way where we can identify what we're going to call an edge. An edge is simply a higher probability of one thing happening over another. So when we talk about an edge, we're talking about simply there's a higher probability of one thing happening over another. Now, the problem is that even though technical analysis creates or identifies these patterns for us, patterns imply consistency, do they not? So in other words, if I can identify a pattern that repeats itself over and over again, it implies to me that I'm going to get a consistent outcome. But do I get a consistent outcome? Well, yeah, I do. But it depends on what level you're talking about. At the macro level, over a large sample size of outcomes, it will be consistent. Just like the flip of a coin. If I flip a coin 1,000 times, and I have, let's say, if I have sample sets, if I have to do 10 sample sets of 1,000 flips, what are my results going to be? They're going to be consistent, are they not? Is that a pattern? I'm going to get a 50-50 outcome, or close to it, if I have a large enough sample size. That's at the macro level. I can get a consistent outcome. But at the micro level, what about each flip in relationship to each other? Yeah, in other words, independent and random. So for an example, if I know that out of 1,000 flips, I'm going to get a 50-50 distribution between heads and tails, am I going to know the exact sequence of heads to tails? No. So I could end up with, streaks of 10 heads in a row, 12 heads in a row. And if I get 12 heads in a row, what are the odds that the next flip's going to be heads? It's still 50-50, right? And so at the micro level, there's a random distribution between heads and tails. At the micro level, with trading or using technical analysis, there's also a random distribution between wins and losses. So you could develop a trading system that you could test and find that, over a whatever sample size of trades, you could have 60% winners or 60% winners, 10% scratches, and 40%, losing, or 30% losing trades. But you wouldn't be able to tell me the actual sequence of winners to losers to scratches, meaning which trades were going to be the winners and which trades were going to be the losers. Which means what? Random outcome. Which means that I'm going to have to adjust my thinking in a way that allows me to compensate for the fact that there's a random outcome when my mind will tell me something different. Because it doesn't feel that way. So for an example, if I get 4 winning trades in a row, what are the odds that the next trade is going to be a winner? Yeah, I don't even know really what when you get right down to it. I mean, it's just like there's almost no way to really put odds on it in some cases. I just don't know what the next trade is going to be no matter what. What is it going to feel that way? I've had 3 winners in a row. What's that next trade? And my edge is now present in the market. The way I define an edge, the variables I use is now present in the market. Is it going to feel like that next trade is going to be a winner or a loser? A winner. And that's because of the way our minds are wired. If I've had 3 or 4 losers in a row, and now my edge is present in the market. What's it going to feel like? What's that? Yeah, I'd be scared to put it on. When in fact, there's a random distribution between wins and losses. I have no way, really, no way of knowing whether that next trade is going to be a winner or a loser. Now, if I've learned to think in probabilities, I wouldn't even hesitate to put that next trade on, regardless of whether I've had three losers in a row or three winners in a row. And once I've learned how to integrate, or once I've learned to effectively think in probabilities, if I've had three winners in a row, I also won't break my money management rules. But getting to the point where I can think in probabilities can really present some problems. There are two basic areas that we have to deal with. One is our social upbringing, and the other is the way our minds are wired. I'll get into in a little bit. Let's say so. Basically, what I'll get into that, get into this stuff in just a little bit about the way our minds are wired and our social upbringing. But what technical indicators don't do is they don't tell us what's going to happen next on a trade by trade basis, and that really is a problem. Because in essence, what we have to learn how to do is we have to learn how to keep our minds focused in the now moment, meaning like what is going on now in this moment relative to my objective to be a consistently successful trader, and not allow our minds to, let's say, tap into a memory of a previous moment. And the problem is our minds are automatically wired to think that way. Our minds are wired to do two things that we have to be concerned with. Our minds are wired to associate, and our minds are wired to avoid pain. And yeah, right. And if you do the exercises as I'm going to give you on Sunday, it won't be that hard. The exercises themselves might be a little difficult, but once you get through it, it'll work. It really will. Because what those exercises are going to do is they're going to actually cause your mind to disassociate what's happening now in this now moment in terms of an opportunity to do something with some previous trade. And also at the same time, not cause you to define and interpret market information in painful ways, because that's basically what ends up happening. So when you look at it, when you look at what this, if you look at what the market does at its most fundamental level, is it gives us up and down ticks, right? I mean, think about it. What does the market gives us? It gives us upticks and downticks and upticks. The upticks and downticks form into patterns. Technical analysis helps us identify the patterns and so that we can and help us define them as edges. Edges meaning there's a higher probability of one thing happening over another, meaning ultimately meaning that if we know how to execute our edges properly, we can enrich ourselves as traders. That's simple, right? Because when you get right down to it, putting money in your account is a function of execution. It's not a function of analysis. Think about that. It's a function of execution. You cannot get a dime in your account from just analysis unless you're a newsletter writer or, offering analysis as a service. As a trader, the only way you get it in your account is by executing properly. And there are all kinds of psychological factors that come into play when we have to behave as opposed to observe. Analysis is a function of observation. Trading is a function of execution. Observing something and acting on it are two completely different ball games. So what we have is we have up and down ticks, right? The up and down ticks, like I said, form into patterns. Now, do the up and down ticks in and of themselves have any charge associated with them? Yes? You think there's a charge? I mean by like negative or positive charge? You do? Why? Oh, I agree completely with what you're saying, but I think you might have misunderstood my question. From the market's perspective, is there a charge to these up and down ticks? No, they're just neutral, right? So what you said is basically exactly what I wanted to get to. To say it's not the market that causes us to be euphoric or feel fear. These up and down ticks, that's all they are, is just up and down ticks. There's no intended, in other words, they don't exist from the perspective of causing us to feel any particular way. It's just information. So for example, when we're interacting with people, the intent could be to cause us to feel some particular way, right? We could be interacting with someone who is being very affectionate, that wants to share that affection, and if we interpret that information in a way that's consistent with what they intend, then we will share that experience. At the same time, if someone's hurling insults at us, what's the intent? In other words, the environment can generate information that has an inherent charge to it, a positive or a negative charge. Are you guys with me on this? I'm kind of getting faces that, so the environment can generate information that has a charge. But market information is neutral. And as a result, for us to experience market information in any kind of painful or threatening way requires an interpretation of that information. So we have two basic kinds of pain that we deal with. We've got physical pain and we've got information-based pain, which I'm going to call emotional pain. All of us understand the nature of physical pain, and we pretty much share the same things. In other words, our body physiology may be different, so that if I punch you in the arm or you punch me in the arm, we might feel a little bit differently about it. I mean, how much pain we experience is hard to measure, but we're both going to experience pain. But is there a universal definition for betrayal? You think there's a universal definition? So in other words, what might cause you to feel betrayed and what might cause me to feel betrayed could be vastly different in terms of the kind of information that I would need, the kind of information that you would need. So the market generates information from a neutral perspective. But we don't perceive it that way. That's what we want to get to. We want to get to the point where we are actually perceiving market information from a neutral or objective perspective, so that it doesn't have the potential to cause us to feel threatened in any way. So that we just see the patterns for what they are, simply an edge indicating it's time to do something, and do something in a certain manner. But go ahead.
Like the more indicated clothing, one something appearing, just that price tag, not
Exactly. And why would people gravitate towards having more and more indicators? Because they're trying to avoid losses. They're trying to use, every possible filter to help them filter out the possibility of a losing trade. Because see, basically the typical trader does not really accept the risk of trading. Only the very best traders truly accept the risk. Now think about what I just said. Accept the risk. The key word is accept. What does it mean to accept something? And when you think about what it means to accept something, it means to be completely reconciled, to be at peace, where there's no internal argument. Most traders like to think of themselves as risk takers because they're involved in an endeavor that's inherently risky. And so therefore, they think of themselves as someone who takes risks. But the reality is that most traders are doing everything possible to avoid the risk of trading. And how do we know that to be a fact? I know that to be an absolute, undisputable fact. Because most traders still make the mistake of not predefining the risk of putting on a trade. What's the connection? To predefine your risk of putting on a trade, you have to gather evidence for why the trade might not work. Most traders don't put on a trade until they've convinced themselves 100% trades win. Why would I put this trade on if I didn't think it was going to be a win? Right? To predefine my risk, I have to start gathering evidence that it might not work or why it might not work. And in the process of gathering that evidence, I might talk myself out of a trade. Right? Now, see, someone who's thinking in probabilities, that wouldn't even occur to them to think this way, but we'll get into that in a second, okay? So if I gather too much evidence, I'll talk myself out of the trade, and many times it feels worse to not have put on a trade that ultimately ends up being a winner, as opposed to putting on a trade that ended up being a loser. And so to get around that whole, to get around that let's say that whole rationalization, what we do is basically just convince ourselves that I wouldn't be doing this if I didn't think I was right. And so therefore, there really is no risk, or I wouldn't be putting on the trade in the first place. Now, that's easy to do. And this is what I'm talking about. Like when I say that there's two inherent problems, is that our minds are wired to avoid pain, and our minds are also wired to associate. We've got some real problems here that we have to get around and compensate for. Because what is my mind going to associate with putting on, with, let's say, a losing trade or being wrong? All of us grow up learning to be wrong in very painful ways. I don't think there's anyone in this room or anybody that I've met that hasn't grown up learning about what it means to be wrong and learning it in ways that isn't inherently painful, both physically and emotionally. Now, if I have the tendency to associate a losing trade with what it means to be wrong, basically what happens is that losing trade taps me into the accumulated pain of every time I've been wrong in my life. It isn't just a trade. It isn't just one in a sequence. Yeah, exactly. Or all the losing trades I've ever had, or anything that I've ever lost in my life. And that could be vast. I mean, in terms of the implications. Losing loved ones, losing pets, all kinds of things like that. So if these things aren't reconciled, meaning we're not at peace with it, then they definitely have a way of filtering right into our trading until we learn how to truly think in probabilities. And then what we've done is put trading into a completely different category in our mind that takes it out of a right or wrong category and takes it out of even a loss category, because losses become a part of the cost of doing business. Wow, that's not good. Oh, you know what? Let's just take a little break then. Or yeah, this is good. This is fine. Just in every time frame. In other words, you can take the same patterns that exist on a daily chart, and you'll see them on an hourly chart, you'll see them on a 10-minute chart, you'll see them on a 5-minute chart, you'll see them on a 2-minute chart. Now, what this does is it turns the market into this never-ending stream of opportunities to enrich ourselves. But like I said before, patterns imply consistency. And based on the way our minds are wired, this becomes a real problem. And this is what we have to overcome. We have to overcome this inherent natural tendency to associate what's happening in this now moment with something that's already in our mind as a memory about some previous moment, because the two do not have a relationship. Because again, the patterns at the macro level, just like that's how casinos make money. Casinos make money because they know that based on the rules of the game, the odds are eventually in their favor, meaning that you can take a bell curve, typical bell curve of which would represent extreme winners, extreme losers, everyone in between. But the bottom line is, based on the rules of the game, over a large enough sample size of hands played, of dice thrown, or spins of the wheel on the roulette, that they will come out net winners by X percentage. And each of them is different. Now, the problem is, how do we train our minds to think like a casino? Because essentially it's the same thing. When these patterns roll around, our minds have the tendency to assume that what happened the last time will happen again this time, when the reality is there's a random outcome. And how do we know there's a random outcome? Even though the pattern exists and we see it, and like I said, the same variables can identify can define it, and they can be exactly the same from one occurrence to the next. You can have the exact same mathematics, the exact same measurements. It can look exactly the same. But the problem from the market's perspective is that each pattern is made up of what? Different traders. Or some of the same traders. It could be some of the same, but the point is that there in every case there are always going to be different traders. And as a result, each of these traders has different expectations about what's going to happen in the future, compelling them to either step up and bid, or accept the bid, or step up and offer, or accept an offer in a way or at a price that they might not have done the last time around. And so as a result of the way our minds are wired, so we can take these up and down ticks, okay, that form into patterns. Nice symmetrical trading range going here, okay? Or this is resistance. Now, all this really means when the market came up to this point right here, what really happened? Just at a very simple fundamental level, what happened? Yeah, it doesn't have to be exactly more people in terms of selling, but at least there was more selling volume, enough volume to absorb all the buy orders with enough left over to cause this to happen, right? In this particular time frame, whatever that is. This could be any time frame chart, by the way. It wouldn't make any difference, right? Okay? And so we've got, so what happened? The exact same thing happened here, only the opposite. Enough buy orders to absorb all the selling, with enough left over for the market to do this. Now, when the market came down to this point again, we have what's called an edge, right? Right, got an edge. If you trade support and resistance, that's an edge. An edge is a higher probability of one thing happening over another. Do we know what's going to happen in this case? Do we know that the market's going to stop here and go up? And why do we know that? Why do we know that we don't know? Okay, but why do we know that we don't know? Based in the context that we're talking about right here. Okay, but why do we know that we don't know? Yeah, we don't know if the same guys are here, that were the same people that bought here. Are they in the market? They could be out to lunch. Right? What? Or what mood they're in, right? Exactly. We don't know. And in essence, it really only takes one trader somewhere in the world to negate the positive outcome of your edge, whatever it is. Now think about that. It only takes one trader somewhere in the world to negate the positive outcome of your edge. Just one. So in essence, when we say, well, we're going to define the risk of this trade, well, what is the risk? Okay? We don't even, we don't have a scale here in terms of dollar value, but we can say that how much distance, how much room am I going to let this price move against my position if I'm a buyer right here to tell me that whoever whereas buying here are either in, or they're either going to come in or not come into the market. That's basically all I'm really saying. And that could be what we call an educated guess. EDGE, EDG dash U dash cated, educated guess. That's all it is. A guess. However, let's say, for an example, we're operating out of the typical mindset of the typical trader. And the typical mindset of the typical trader is operating out of 4 basic fears. The fear of being wrong, the fear of losing money, the fear of missing out, and the fear of leaving money on the table. Now, what's going to happen in this case? First of all, the market's coming down to what he defines as an edge. Is he going to put this trade on? Even is he even going to get it on? There could be all kinds of factors that would come into play that he may not even get this trade on. But let's say he works through whatever fears or hesitations, or he convinces it doesn't work through. Let's take that back and say, let's just say that he convinces himself that this trade is going to work. Because basically, that's the only way he's going to get it on in the first place. And if he's convinced that this trade is going to work, it's unlikely that he will predefine his risk. Basically, just go through the same kind of thought pattern that we just went through to say, hey, look, it only takes one trader somewhere in the world to negate the positive outcome of my edge. Therefore, how much room am I going to give the market, against my position if I take this trade right here to tell me that people are either going to come in and buy it and support this price or they're not? He doesn't do that. So he gets into this trade, and the market does something like this. Now, one thing I haven't said that you're going to have to keep in mind for tomorrow and Sunday is that, remember I said that our minds are wired to avoid pain. This is a natural way that our minds function. There are 2 kinds of pain: physical pain and emotional. Physical pain we talked about. And hit somebody, come into contact with the environment in some way, and our physiology will cause us to experience pain. Emotional pain is different. It's information-based. Information can cause us to tap into something that's inside of our mind that is made up of, let's say, negatively charged energy, and put us into a negatively charged state of mind or fear. And what is fear? Fear is just telling us that there's something out there that we need to avoid. Okay? Our mind has pain. Our mind has automatic pain avoidance mechanism. So, for an example, if I set my hand on this table, it turned out to be a hot burner, I don't have to think about moving my hand. It happens automatically, subconsciously. There's no argument. There's no internal conflict. My hand comes off. The same kind of mechanisms exist for information. In other words, our minds can cause us to experience information in ways that are very different than what was intended from the environment's perspective, based on what we might be afraid of. It can actually distort and alter that information in ways that are consistent with keeping us out of pain. So, for an example, everyone in this room has learned enough about the nature of the market to say that you can recognize a trend, can you not? Is that a distinction that you've learned about the nature of the way markets can move, that the markets can trend? And we're going to define the trend as simply a series of higher highs and higher lows, or lower lows and lower highs in whatever time frame we want, right? Okay? And one thing we've also noticed about a trend is that once a trend starts, it can keep on going, right? In other words, we can assume that, once momentum gathers on one side of the market or the other, in other words, one side gets the advantage, one side has a stronger conviction about their belief in the future than the people that are taking the other side of the trade, that trend will continue until people's conviction change. That's it. Okay? And a trend is an easy way to make money, right? Catch a trend, and that's an easy way to enrich ourselves, right? Okay. So, now, if I'm operating out of a fear of being wrong, And my mind is wired to avoid pain. Now think about this. My mind is wired to avoid pain. The up and down ticks that the market's giving me will take on a certain quality in relationship to what's going on inside my mind. From the market's perspective, these are just up and down ticks forming into patterns that represent opportunity. Say that again. From the market's perspective, these are just up and down ticks forming into patterns that represent opportunities to enrich ourselves. But that doesn't necessarily mean we're going to interpret it that way. So if I'm operating out of a fear of being wrong, the principle that I'm going to give you right now is that principle that you're going to learn about is that fear causes us to focus on the object of our fear so that we end up creating the very experience we're trying to avoid. Did I just say that again? Fear causes us to narrow our focus of attention. Fear causes us to narrow our focus of attention onto the object of our fear so that we end up creating the very experience we're trying to avoid. So if I'm operating out of a fear of being wrong and the market's giving me upticks and giving me downticks, what ticks am I likely to focus my attention on and put greater significance on? The upticks. The upticks, right? Why? Because the upticks take me out of my pain. So for an example, if I'm getting one uptick in relationship to the downtick, one uptick for every 4 or 5 downticks, the market is in a downtrend. But what I'm going to do is my mind is automatically going to narrow my focus of attention so that I place an inordinate amount of significance on that information and categorically ignoring or either ignoring or placing a lack of significance on this information right here. Because this information is being defined and interpreted as threatening because it's going to cause me to tap into my fear of being wrong, meaning I have to admit that I'm wrong, which in many cases might tap us into the accumulated emotional pain of every time I've been wrong in my life. And so therefore, this takes on an enormous amount of significance. And so what I do is I categorically ignore this information in relationship to this information, because every time I get these upticks, it feels like relief to me. I can say, well, it's finally all over. It's coming back in my direction. Now, this isn't the only fear this trader is going to be operating out of. He's also going to be operating out of a fear of losing money. But that fear is going to be sort of in the back of his mind and coming to the forefront the more the market moves against him. In other words, the more the market moves against him, the more he has to acknowledge the fact that he is losing money. And there will come a point at which there's a relative balance in this trader's mind in terms of these two energies. Now think about this. Think about this in terms of physics. There will come a point at which there is a relative balance or then an imbalance, let's say, between what is more painful, admitting that he's wrong or losing one more dollar. What hurts more? At some point, and everyone is different, you see. For every trader is different. At some point, that point will be reached in which losing one more dollar will be 1 degree more painful than admitting that he's wrong. That's the way I'd like to say it. 1 degree more painful than admitting that he's wrong, and that's the point at which he'll get out of that trade.
Yeah. Yeah.
Well, yeah, put it this way. You couldn't add to a loser. You're John, right?
Yes.
Okay, John, you couldn't add to a loser unless you're convinced, correct? You have to be. You couldn't take that act. And the problem is sometimes you're going to do it and it'll work. And hopefully that will never happen, because if you do it again and it works, and I mean, if you do it again and it doesn't work, it could be a catastrophic. That's why, in the way that, over the years when I've worked with traders, especially floor traders, there are very few people that I've worked with that are nimble enough to add to a losing position. I say nimble enough, I mean nimble enough mentally to be able to add to, or not add to a losing position, but add even to a winning position. I'm not saying there aren't some people who can't do it, but it's rare. It's a rare person who can do it. Because you add to a winning position and you literally have to be, unless it's part of a money management regimen, that's objective. Put it this way: that there's an objective money management regimen there. For most people, it isn't. They add to a winning position because they're convinced it increases their average price, which means that the smaller the distance the market has to go against them, put them into a losing trade, and they end up not with any profits at all, and usually a cash stop loss. Whereas what we're going to do on Sunday is we're gonna you're going to see how important it is to actually scale out of it instead of adding to your winners and taking away. Anyway, let's get back to this. So now, what happens when this guy finally blows out of this trade? Obviously, the market always does. I mean, that's what that happens. But really, what else is he going to do? Well, I mean, what's he going to do? Not what the market does. What is he going to do when he gets out of this trade? He gets a clear hand, and what's he going to say to himself? This is universal, by the way. This is universal. What's he going to do? What have you done? Come on, what have you done? No, forget the market goes up. Forget this. You get out right here, and you're going to look at this chart, and what are you going to say? Well, okay, but besides that, okay, what are you going to say? No, but besides that, what are you going to say? What? What? You're going to blame? No. How could I miss that? Look, come on.
I didn't work.
It's like, yeah, exactly. In other words, look at that nice trend. You're going to hit yourself in the head and say, why didn't I just sell? Why is it that as soon as you're out of that trade, you can now make this distinction that it was a downtrending market, whereas while you were in the trade, you could not make that distinction? Yeah, the fear is gone. It opens up your perception. Fear narrows your focus of attention onto the object of your fear so that you end up creating the very experience you're trying to avoid. He was trying to avoid being wrong and made himself wrong based on his interpretation of market information. Most traders will blame the market. And you can see that the market had nothing to do with his loss. Nothing. Yeah, whatever. So what we have to do, of course, is learn how to trade without fear. Learn how to trade from a carefree state of mind so that we no longer have this potential to define and interpret market information in painful ways. The information itself is not threatening. It's the interpretation that makes it threatening. And there are internal mechanisms that control how we interpret information. That's what we have to get at if we want to create consistent results. We have to get at that mechanism that causes us to interpret information in certain ways and change that mechanism. That's basically what this whole workshop is about. Just as an aside, before I go any further with this, is there anyone in this room who has not at some time felt betrayed by the market? Is there anyone in the room who at some time or another has not felt betrayed by the market? So what I'm saying is that everyone in the room at some time in the trading career, in some way or another, has felt that the market betrayed them. Daily, okay, good. You have not or have? Okay. Okay, now think about this. Now think about the relationship or the stance, the psychological stance you are taking towards the market when you feel betrayed. Just think about it. Think about the implications here. How often have you woken up in the morning and said to yourself, I wonder how I can or might fulfill someone else's dream of financial independence today? How might I contribute? Yeah. How how might I contribute to someone else's dreams of acquiring wealth and financial independence through their trading? Because that's exactly what you're saying to the market when you feel betrayed. That's exactly the stance you're taking. You're expecting the market to do something for you, when the reality is, you already know the reality. Everyone trades for their own self-interest. But everyone who puts on a trade, at least when they put it on at that moment, thought it was going to be a winner, or they wouldn't have done it. The market is not there to give you money. You can take the money if you've got the appropriate psychological resources to do it. But it isn't there to give it to you because everyone else wants it too. And we can give it to ourselves based on how clearly we can perceive the possibilities from its perspective. That's why I say that thinking in probabilities is synonymous with thinking in the market's perspective. What's possible from its perspective based on the patterns that it's displaying at any given moment. Take this same trader and put him into a winning trade and look what happens. Now, in this case, the market's giving him exactly what he wants. Okay? He's not in a losing trade. Now he's in a winning trade. Well, what do you think? Typical trader, what do you think? Now it's giving him up and down ticks that are forming into patterns. What do you think he's going to focus on? The up ticks or the down ticks? Now he's going to focus on the down ticks. Why? Yes, market's going to take his money away. And in the process of believing or thinking or fearing that the market's going to take his money away, what is he doing? He's taking his own money away, right? So instead of letting this trend fulfill itself, chances are he's maybe out right here or right here. Probably most likely going to be out right here. Right? Because who hasn't been in a trade or in a winning trade where they didn't take any profits, the market came back to their entry point or below, and they ended up with no money or a loss. So therefore, fear causes us to narrow our focus of attention onto the object of our fear, so that we end up creating the very experiences we are trying to avoid. The point is, if we are going to create consistent results from our trading, we cannot have this potential. We cannot have this potential to define and interpret what is essentially neutral information in painful ways. We just can't do it. Other than these kind of self-sabotaging errors that we might have the potential to make as a result of not, let's say, believing that we deserve the money. Because in essence, remember that third category that I talked about, a couple of hours ago? We've got defining an edge, thinking in probability, self-sabotaging beliefs. Self-sabotaging beliefs fall into the category of, in essence, saying it isn't right to make money this way, or I don't believe I deserve the money. And there are a lot of people who grow up with beliefs saying that it isn't appropriate or right or let's say Christian or spiritual or whatever to make money as a trader. Some of the more difficult traders I've worked with are people who were brought up in Southern Baptist. Because a lot of the people that I've worked with that came from that kind of a background, it gets pounded in their brain from a pretty early age that gambling is evil. And it's very difficult to look at trading as gambling, or not to find it that way. Or if you grow up from a background that you were taught that you have to render services, to be paid appropriately, you have to render some sort of worthwhile service. Now, certainly as traders, you're providing liquidity for other traders. That's a service of some sort. But a lot of times that's a real difficult one to reconcile their belief that they're providing a worthwhile service. Yeah, right. Exactly, right. Well, the point that I was making is that I kind of got sidetracked. I'm sorry. The point that I was making is that is that virtually every error that you have the potential to make as a trader, every error that will detract from your ability to create the kind of equity curve that we were talking about in the very beginning when we started, is all going to be a function of your inability to think objectively thinking probabilities. What, and well, first of all, let's look at what those errors are. These just typical errors. Well, you know, this. Okay, what are the consequences of thinking or assuming you believe that we'll know what happened next? This is exactly, this is exactly what our minds cause us to do. In other words, when we get or when we have an edge that comes up where we have not learned to think in probabilities, our minds have the tendency to cause us to think we know what's going to happen next because of the way it feels. Remember I said that we have 3 winning trades in a row? What's it going to feel like? It's going to feel like the next trade's got to be a winner. It has to be. If we've had 3 losing in a row, what's it going to feel like? It feels like the next trade is going to be a loser, when yet we have no idea what the sequence between winners and losers is going to be. Our pain avoidance mechanisms and this inherent tendency to associate causes us to believe that we know what's going to happen next. Are you with me on this? Everybody, I'm just kind of getting, when in fact our mind has to be open to the fact that what anything can happen. So here's what happens. We have a lack of objectivity. In other words, the inability to perceive the market's potential from its perspective, like what happens here, where what we did is we were completely blinded to the fact that the market was trending against us. It's really amazing how this works. It's like we're literally blinded to our own distinction. As a matter of fact, if I were to kind of define the nature of objectivity, which we're going to go into later on tomorrow anyway, is that if you looked at like this, if these being all the possibilities that exist in terms of all the number of distinctions that the market can make in terms of behavior patterns, if someone actually was able to learn every possible pattern that the market could express, every possible pattern, let's say is represented by that line. It's erroneous to think this way. This would represent 100% of the pattern, okay? Let's say the typical trader learns, I don't know, 20% of those patterns. Okay? Now, it means, in essence, what I'm saying here is that if you've learned to recognize 20% of the patterns, what about the other 80%? What are the implications of what I'm saying? They're invisible, aren't they? Yeah, you can't perceive them. Now think about this. They're invisible. They exist. It's just like the very first time you looked at a price chart. Now, the very first time you looked at a price chart, what did you see? You saw lines. Well, you didn't. You may even may have seen some patterns, but you didn't understand the relationships between what was going on with the lines. Certainly not like what you see now. So, if I could magically reproduce the very first chart you ever looked at in your life, would you see something different than the first time you looked at it? You'd see opportunities that were literally invisible the first time, right? So, what you're seeing are the patterns you've learned about, whereas they were literally invisible before them. So what I'm saying is that out of all the patterns that the market can express in terms of its behavior, there's some finite percentage that each of us have learned. Finite. And the ones we haven't discovered yet can be occurring, but unnoticeable. Okay? So this would be if you and I could perceive 100% of what was available, then we would be experiencing an objective, let's say, an objective state of mind. If you could even say, define an objective state of mind as having simultaneous awareness of everything going on at once. But that's basically what it would require. Simultaneous awareness of everything going on at once, which would also be like maybe part of the definition of God. Simultaneous awareness of everything going on at once. If you don't have simultaneous awareness of everything going on at once, then you are experiencing something less than what's being made available at any given moment in terms of the way the market or the environment is expressing itself. Now, what we want as traders is we don't necessarily have to be able to perceive the full repertoire of all the patterns that the market can express. But what we do want is we want to be able to perceive what we've learned. We want to be able to get whatever percentage we've got. And the more fear that we operate out of, the less we perceive. So we go down almost to zero. We can get to the point where we're almost down to zero, down to nothing. We're only perceiving one possibility out of the many that may exist at any given moment, based on how much fear we're operating out of. Fear closes. In other words, an objective state of mind for each of us as individuals would be to be able to perceive 100% of what we've learned. 100% of what we've learned. Since all of us in this room have learned to recognize the nature of a trend, then we don't want to be in a position where we have the potential to define and interpret any of these up and down ticks in painful ways, because we will lose that ability to perceive that trend in that moment until we're out of the trade. So here are the typical errors that we can make. Won't predefine the risk in advance of getting into a trade. And it's amazing. I mean, it's just like, it's amazing, that everyone in this room knows from every book you've ever read, from any great trader you've ever heard talk or you've talked to, that how essential it is to know what your risk is, right? And yet we'll continually make these errors over and over again. All that's really telling you is that you haven't learned how to think in probabilities yet. You haven't really learned to think in the market's perspective. Why? Because from the market's perspective, what does it take? It only takes one trader somewhere in the world to negate the positive outcome of your trade. That's all, just one. Now, once you really believe that, now think about this. Once you really believe that, will it be possible for you to ever get into a trade without predefining rules? It's very difficult. It's very, very difficult to act in a way that violates what you believe. It takes an enormous amount of energy. Think about that. How often can you act in a way that contradicts what you believe to be true? How often have you, or what would it take for you to behave in a way that contradicts what you believe to be true? It's extremely difficult, isn't it? It takes an enormous amount of energy, depending on how strong the belief is, put it that way. Do people go around violating their beliefs? No. People fight wars over their beliefs. We fight for our beliefs. We get into arguments and conflicts based on what we believe. If you believe that it really only took one trader, just one trader somewhere in the world, to negate the positive outcome of your edge, would you ever get into a trade without predefining your risk? No, you wouldn't. You couldn't. There is no absolute. I said it was an educated guess. Where?
If you won't find your risk,
Educated, okay? In other words, when you look at these kind of patterns, and depending on the time frame, if this were a daily chart, as opposed to a 2-minute chart, you'd have to risk a little bit more, wouldn't you? The distance you'd have to give the market in this case on a daily chart would probably have to be more than what you would on a 2-minute chart. But what you do is you look at this chart, and it's just something that you get after years of experience or years of looking at charts, and not even years, but at least enough where you say, where would you put your risk? How much you risk on a trade like that, in a pattern that looked like that?
Eighth quarter point.
An eighth or quarter of a point because what kind of charts do you trade?
1 minute chart.
He trades 1 minute charts. Now, if you were trading a daily chart, how much would you risk? Yeah, a couple of bucks, right?
Right. Cold money then.
Yeah, let's see. Yeah, it's just really, it's just you've got to give on a long term chart, you've got to give the market more room than on a short term chart. In other words, on a short term chart, this trade should work right away. If it doesn't work right away, it's probably not going to work at all. It doesn't matter because even if it doesn't, you cut your loss and get right back in again. Well, that's something. Yeah, that's a whole other skill set you've got to learn. But are you with me on this? Okay, but it really is an educated guess. Now, you can mathematically determine this based on previous experience. In other words, you can run all kinds of back testing on this kind of a pattern and say that based on what you have here, if you can duplicate this pattern over and over again, how often does the market come to this point and not quite stop you out and then go back up again? Maybe go a little bit beyond and not go back up and not, after you've been stopped out, how often did it stop you out and just keep on going? I mean, these are things, just based on people who get into really sophisticated systems. I don't particularly do that. I just eyeball it and say, how much room am I going to give it? What's the dollar value of that distance? And if I can accept the dollar value, then I take the trade. Well, John, did I answer your question? So, John, did I answer your question? Okay.
Give us an educated guess as to what you said is your tolerance for those down ticks in the uptrend.
Huh?
Well, the other direction, when you got an uptrend going, how much tolerance would you?
We're going to do this on Sunday. Well, I'm going to give you a way to handle this on Sunday so that you can stay in this trade. That's what you're asking me.
Yes.
Okay. Okay. Another error. Define the risk, but won't take the loss. It turns into a bigger one. Okay. A perfect example. There's a money manager that many years ago that came to a workshop just like this one, and he went back home. And in fact, it's an example I even put in Trading in the Zone. And he was waiting for a belly trade for quite a while, as a matter of fact. And he had all his analysis done, and he was waiting for the market to get up to a certain point. And he was going to sell, and so as someone who actually had a degree in probabilities, he said, okay, I think in probabilities, and therefore, as a good trader, I'm going to put my stop in the market. So he did what he needed to do, right? But does that mean just because he went through the motions of putting his stop in the market that he truly accepted the risk of the trade? If someone can put a stop in the market but still not be completely reconciled to losing the money. And what did I say? What did it mean to accept something? To be completely reconciled, to be at peace. In other words, there aren't any competing and conflicting mental forces inside of his mental environment. So he put his stop in. The market started, moving against him, past his entry point. And, he convinced himself at that point that he was going to get stopped out. He never would have gotten stopped out. He blew out of the trade. The market completely reversed, and it turned out to be a huge winner. He never got back in. And he called me up and said, hey, what's going on? I did what I was supposed to do. I put my stop in the market.
You said you just.
But he took it out. I mean, he took it out because he never really accepted the risk.
It was almost as if he was shocked when it didn't.
Right, exactly right. He was shocked because it didn't immediately reverse after he got in. That's what it really amounted to. And see, the thing is, here's where really, where we also have this potential to define and interpret market information in painful ways, is because we talk about emotional pain, all of us want our expectations fulfilled. And see, when you think about what an expectation is simply a belief projected into some future moment in the environment. Now think about what I just said. We can't expect something that we don't believe or that we don't know about, put it that way. So what I'm saying is that an expectation is something that I either expect to see, hear, taste, smell, or touch in some future moment. And if the market shows up exactly the way I expect it to, now this is universal, by the way. This isn't just Mark. This is universal. If the market or the environment shows up exactly the way I expect it to, how do I feel? I could, depending on what the situation was. Yeah, satisfied, at the very least satisfied, right? A sense of well-being, correct? Is this not universal? And to whatever degree the environment does not show up the way I expect it to, how does that feel? Yeah, pain. Emotional, it has the potential to cause me to experience emotional pain. So when you really get right down to it, to think in probabilities, we have to learn how to manage our expectations. Our expectations have to be in line with the realities from the market's perspective. But before we get into that, let's just finish up these errors. Okay, hesitate as a result of an internal argument, get in too late or not at all. Jump the gun, anticipate an edge that never develops. Getting out of a winning trade too soon, leaving money on the table. Move a stop close to your entry point, get stopped out, and the market goes back in your favor. See, if I hand in the ball. Okay. Anyway, these are all the, not all the errors that people can make, but all the typical errors that people make as a result of not thinking in probabilities. So what exactly does it mean to think in probabilities? It means believing at the very core of your identity that 1, anything can happen. 2, every moment is unique. 3, there's a random distribution between wins and losses on any given set of variables that define an edge. And 4, you don't need to know what's going to happen next to create consistent results. Now think about those statements. Just for a moment. If I believed that anything could happen at any given moment, and I believe that every moment is unique. Now think about the word unique. What does that imply? Right. Now think about every moment is unique. That means not like any other moment. Unique means not like any other moment. If I believe that this moment is not like any other moment, then what does my mind have the capability to associate that moment with? I can accept any outcome. We say, why put the trade on? Because you've got an edge.
No, very not having an active system.
Oh no, yeah, no, you've got an edge. You've got an edge.
Okay.
You've defined your edge, but okay, this moment, there's a pattern, and this moment is like, let's say, we'll put it this way, just so you're not confused about this, that you've got an edge, and you're basically trying to develop a 2-tiered belief system. One, we're at the macro level, you know that patterns exist, but at the micro level, the patterns have a random distribution in terms of outcome. So that I've got a pattern, and that as a result, that pattern has a potential to cause me to, let's say, by behaving in the appropriate ways, to enrich myself. But that the outcome to that pattern is unique in relationship to anything that happened in the past. So, but I was just talking about the concept of uniqueness itself. In other words, once I get that trade on, if I believe that each moment that it's on, that each moment is really unique in terms of what the market is telling me in that moment, then I'm going to keep my mind open to what it's telling me from its perspective. What I want to do, the whole objective, is to disassociate what's happening now with any other outcome that you had. Disassociate. Because the reality is there really is no relationship. That really is true. Our minds don't look at it that way, but it really is true. Same thing, there's a random distribution between wins and losses on any given set of variables that define an edge. Now, if you think back to those errors, those kind of errors that we have the capability of making, or I don't need to know what's going to happen next to create consistent results or make money. If I have those 5 beliefs installed in my mental environment in a way where they're functional, and we're gonna get into what that means to be functional tomorrow, then I have basically eliminated my potential to define and interpret market information in a threatening way. If I've eliminated my potential to define and interpret market information in a threatening way, then my expectations will be neutral. And I will be in an objective state of mind, leaving myself open to whatever it is that I've perceived about the nature of market movement, meaning that I'll be able to perceive all the patterns that I've learned about. I'll go back. Won't define the risk in advance of getting into a trade. If anything can happen and every moment is unique, am I going to get into, if I believe that, am I going to not predefine my risk? I define the risk, won't take the loss because it turns into a bigger one. The only way that I could not take my stop out of the market, let's say, or not execute a losing trade based on let's say my predefined risk point would be because I have convinced myself that I know what's going to happen next. Is there any other way I could do that? I pull my stop or not execute a losing trade only because one reason. Every error that you're going to make, all these errors right here, every single one of them, we're going to go down the list, and any other ones that you could think of, are all going to be the result of thinking you know what's going to happen next. Thinking, assuming, or believing that you know what's going to happen next is what causes the errors. These 5 fundamental truths that I just gave you about the nature of the market break that. I shouldn't use the word break. It stops that whole process of thinking, assuming, or believing you know what's going to happen next. Because you've learned that you don't need to know what's going to happen next to make money. And you don't. Really, what is trading when you think about it? You break the act of trading down. It's really simple. What is it? Not just an educated guess, but what is it? An edge. Define the risk and execute the trade. It either works or it doesn't. That's all trading is. That's it. You don't need to know what's going to happen next to make money in this process. That isn't part of the process. The process is define an edge. How do we define an edge? A higher probability of one thing happening over another. Not what going to happen for sure. A higher probability of one thing happening over another. Define the risk. An educated guess. Or it can be precise, whatever. Use a mechanical system. It doesn't matter. All I'm saying is that this is the process. Define an edge. get on an edge, define the risk, execute the trade. That's trading. That's trading. There's nothing in that process that has anything to do with knowing what's going to happen next. When you get right down to it, it isn't any different than pulling the handle of a slot machine, only you've got the edge in your favor. The pattern either works or it doesn't. And you've got a way to take your profits, but otherwise it's going a little bit beyond this discussion at this moment. All I'm saying is that, either works or it doesn't, you go to the next trade. Either works or it doesn't, you go to the next trade. Either works or it doesn't, you go to the next trade. If you're the kind of person who likes to use their intellect to determine what's going to happen next, you're going to have a problem being a trader. That answers your question too. That's someone who needs to know what's going to happen, who needs to have that kind of certainty that I don't act until I know what's going to happen next. They have problems being traders. You have to be really comfortable with uncertainty, that it doesn't matter. Because what do I need to know? First of all, I don't have to take responsibility for what the market does. I don't know what the market's going to do. It's a collection of individuals who are going to act in some particular way. I know the market's going to do something. I know it will do something. That's the expectation I have when I get into a trade. I think it's going to do something. What? I don't know. I don't have to know. I don't care. What do I know? What do I know? What do I have to know? Come on, what do I need to know?
Probability.
What?
There's a random outcome.
I need a red edge, and what else do I need to know? What my risk is, right?
You risk.
Yeah, that's it. That's all I need to know. And how I'm going to take my profits. That's what I need to know. That I know every time. If I don't know that every time, I don't get into a trade. As long as you get into trading with this idea that you've got to know what's going to happen next, you think you're going to know, you're always going to be susceptible to these errors. You're always going to be susceptible. I'm not saying you won't make money, because you know what? You can make money whether you make these errors or not. Remember, you don't have to know anything about the market. You don't have to know anything about yourself. You don't have to know anything about what we're talking about to make money. And you can make all these errors and still make money. Yes or no? Yes, you can. Will you make consistent money? No, you won't. That's a fact. So we're kind of getting to the point where we're getting an idea as to what we need to do here, right? Are we getting an idea of what we need to do? What do we need to do? Stop trading. I like that.
What?
What do we need to do? Where do you think we're going? Where do you think we're going in the next 2 days on Saturday and Sunday? Where are we going? What are we doing? Go ahead. Somebody, go ahead. David, what?
Reinforcing these notions.
Notions? Okay. That's all right, Dave. It's all right. I love it. Yeah. Oh boy. Yeah, that's exactly what we're going to do. We are going to learn enough about the nature of beliefs and how they function in our mental environment so that we can effectively install these beliefs inside our brain at a functional level without any conflict. That's what we're going to learn in the next 2 days. besides also learning how to identify and neutralize self-sabotaging beliefs and what to do about euphoria. This is what this workshop is all about right here. When you got those in your brain at a functional level, you will stop the errors. They cannot happen. And to the degree to which they do happen is just an indication as to how much work you need to do to get those in your brain at a functional level. And if you really want to, if your desire is strong enough to create consistent results, you'll do the work. If it's not strong enough, you won't. It's kind of that simple. And you don't have to feel obligated to do the work. Like I said in the very beginning, it might take a long time to get to the point where you're really willing to do what you need to do to get those beliefs in your mental environment at a functional level, because you may have other agendas about why you trade that are in conflict with these particular beliefs. There may be a lot of other reasons why you put on trades that have nothing to do with what it means to be consistent. Anybody think of reasons why people trade that have nothing to do with being consistent? What might be some of those agendas that I'm talking about? Every feeling in the world? Okay, well, yeah, but anything specific? What?
Great loss.
Well, that's an agenda, sure. Revenge. That's not going to promote consistency, I don't think. That's pretty inconsistent with what it means to be consistent. Anything else?
Good behavior.
What?
It could be.
Okay, addicted. It could be addicted to random rewards, which I'm going to talk about in a minute. That would be an agenda that would be inconsistent with what it means to be consistent. Anything else?
Okay.
Entertainment. Perfect. Anything else? Boredom. That's part of entertainment, but you entertain yourself when you're bored. Know some people like to be heroes? I work with a lot of traders who generate losses just so they can work their way out of the hole. Floor traders especially like doing that. They got sort of a cowboy mentality. So yeah, right.
It's
Right.
they have big loss.
Right. And you probably did you get that on the tape? Okay, good. You're talking kind of low, so I didn't take that out.
Gotcha.
Yeah, sure. Yeah, there could be just any number of reasons, like you said. Just all the range is really great, but that's why those agendas will be reasons why people won't do this kind of work. Not until you resolve that what you really want first and foremost is to create consistent results. And that's why I said in the very beginning, a couple of hours ago, that it really has a lot to do with the way you want to live your life. But I will say that if you do the exercise I'm going to give you to install those beliefs, and if you do it diligently, and if you do it until you can do it without any internal conflict or argument, you will have succeeded in installing those beliefs. It does work. But good. But like I was going to say, it's a matter of wanting to do it. Now, the other thing I wanted to talk about in terms of how much time we got, by the way. Where are we? 4:09. This is going to take a few minutes. Is this whole idea of being addicted to random rewards? It's really a powerful addiction, by the way. There are a number of studies that have been done, especially on primates, where if you start primates out, with teaching them to do a task, and you reward the task, or you give them a reward for the task on a consistent schedule. They do the task, they get the reward. They do the task, they get the reward. If you stop giving them the reward, what do you think happens? They stop doing the task. But reward them on a completely random schedule. Okay? Completely random. And from their perspective now, they don't know that you've decided they're never going to get rewarded again. Okay? That's what you've done. You've decided you're never going to reward them again.
You.
And what scientists found is that it depends on the personality of the monkey, because some people are more, let's say, susceptible to addictive behavior than others. I think there's probably some sort of chemical makeup that has a lot to do with it. But there are some monkeys who will do the task indefinitely. They never get rewarded again, and they keep on doing it. And that's why there's some people that can get addicted to, pulling the handle of a slot machine or not pushing a button. And it has a lot to do with just that kind of euphoric high that we get when we get this unexpected surprise. And trading can, no matter how we handle our trades, whether we handle them very professionally or whether we handle them very haphazardly, we can always get that unexpected surprise. And that can be really addicting. But there are other problems too, and that's one of the things that this was in Trading in the Zone where I kind of related this, where I was speaking at a conference, and I was talking to an editor from one of the major publishers in our industry, and he asked me, he said, why do people who are so accomplished, in their lives, in their other part of their lives, in their professions, can fail so miserably at trading? What is it about trading where so many people are we all doing the wrong things? And yet we're so, and yet people get into it and we're really attracted to it. And the way I answered them was that I said that, people really are attracted to trading because what it really offers us is this unlimited freedom of creative expression. It's an endeavor that is sort of outside all the normal social structure that we all grow up with. So for an example, when you consider that each of us are born into some sort of society, a family, a region, a state, a city, a country, whatever, and all these societies have rules about how we need to behave. And the problem is that when people can be born into these social structures where there's naturally a high degree of correspondence between the child and the rules that already exist. And then other kids can be born into the social structures where there's a very high degree of a lack of correspondence, meaning that whatever the kid is naturally attracted to. Now you think about it, regardless of a child's, let's say, inherent behavior characteristics, there is one characteristic that is common to all children. And what is that characteristic? Curiosity. Curiosity is a characteristic that is common to all children. Leave children alone, and they will naturally explore their environment. Quite naturally. Now, are all children naturally attracted to the same thing? So in other words, there is some sort of selective process going on, isn't there? In other words, out of all the things that are available in the environment for a child to be attracted to, children will naturally select. And this goes all the way back to when the kid's an infant. So there is some sort of force inside of us, inside of each of us, that naturally selects what we are attracted to in the environment out of the vast array of things that we can be attracted to. Some societies, meaning families, parents, whatever, support these natural attractions to some degree or another, and some do not. Problem is that when they're not supported, meaning when we're denied our ability or denied, let's say, the experience that we want as a result of these natural attractions, meaning that our parents are saying, no, you can't do that, or whatever, it builds up what I call these denied impulses. In other words, if you think about it, I think like our mind in some ways is like when we're attracted to something, it's like when a child, take a child that's they're curious, they're playing with something, and you take it away from them, and what do? They start crying. Why? They're not done experiencing, okay? It's like the desire for a certain type of experience creates like a vacuum in our mind. And that vacuum has to be filled with the experience that we desire. Deny it, in other words, as an outside force, deny that experience, and the child will naturally cry, and crying is a natural mechanism to let's say put the child's mind back into balance. What scientists have also found is that tears are composed of negatively charged ions, and crying, I think, is simply a natural mechanism to put our minds back into balance, because what happens is that the lack of experience, the lack of the child being done with that experience didn't fill up the vacuum, and the crying reconciles the imbalance so that the child can be in a state of relative balance and go on with their lives. However, many children are not even allowed to cry, right? Especially males. And so therefore, as a result, we end up growing up with a buildup of these denied impulses. So that when we, as adults, when we get to the point where we discover trading, we find our sort of panacea of freedom, where we basically make all the rules. The only rule is that you have enough money to open up an account. Other than that, you decide when to get in, you decide how long to stay in, you decide when to get in, to get in with how much, and when to get out. Right? In each moment, the market does offer us as traders this opportunity to get into, to add to, detract from, or exit a position every moment. And we make all the rules. The problem is we grow up with a natural aversion to making rules, because we've been trying to get away from them all of our lives. And that's one of the reasons why it's so difficult to even do the kind of exercise that I'm going to suggest on Sunday, is because it does require making and adhering to certain rules. And you probably will find there'll be a natural resistance to even doing the exercise, regardless of the benefits that you perceive that you'll derive from it. And that's all right. And that's what I said before. It might take a long time to get to the point where you're ready to do this. Because it's a two-edged sword when you look at it. I mean, it's like here we've got freedom, but with freedom comes responsibility, because or even or even not wanting to take responsibility because of the painful ways in which we learn about what we're responsible for, what we're not responsible for. But also with freedom comes the potential to damage ourselves. So we have an unlimited environment where we can do an unlimited amount of damage. The way to prevent damaging ourselves is to institute some regimen or some rules. But what we have are a backlog of denied impulses where we weren't allowed to express ourselves as we grew up, giving us a natural aversion to creating even our own rules. They're not somebody else's, they're our own. So it's like, hey, I found this panacea of freedom, unlimited, I can express myself in any particular way, possibility of unlimited riches, but I've got to create some rules. And not only do I have to create them, I have to learn to abide by them. Whoa, hey, no way. Which makes it easy to trade randomly. Because see, when you trade randomly, meaning when you're using virtually an unlimited number of variables to either enter or exit a trade, not a limited set, but in essence, an unlimited set. What I mean by an unlimited set of variables? Okay, listening to the news, or listening to a friend, or, maybe in combination with some technical advice or technical signal that you might get. Nothing that's systematic. Because see, by trading randomly, you can easily take credit for the trades that work and easily do what? Distance and separate yourself from trades that didn't. Psychologically distance yourself. In other words, not take responsibility. Trading is the, hardest easy money that you'll ever make. Trading is simple. And it can be. If you get the right mindset, it is easy. Mm, mm, mm. So it's almost 9 o'clock. As far as I'm concerned, we're done unless you guys have any questions. And also, before we split up, I just want to know that what are we going to do tomorrow? What do you think we're going to do? What are we going to get into and why? This is really important. What are we going to get into and why?
Mental visual repertoire.
A what? A mental vision?
Well,
Okay.
What our
Okay.
mental state is now,
Okay.
and the inherent weaknesses and how we do things.
Okay. But can you say it more specifically?
Or we're screwing up now.
Okay, yeah, we know that. We already did that. We did that tonight. Okay, but what are we going to get into tomorrow? What specifically are we going to get into?
Falling beliefs.
Yeah, we're going to learn about the nature of belief. Because in essence, this is what this is all about, right? It's really all about what we believe. Because what controls our interpretation of information? Maybe I wasn't clear about that. That's why I'm asking. And I'm glad I did. What controls our interpretation of information? Something has to. Or what we believe, exactly. That's without really saying that. That's in essence what I've been saying all along. When I said if I believe that anything can happen, then that will control my interpretation of information in a way that will cause me to act in a way that's consistent with what I believe. Something has to control the way we interpret information. We don't all interpret it the same way. There has to be some mechanism. So that's the mechanism that we're going to learn how to work with in a way so that we can interpret market information in a way that's consistent with the realities from the market's perspective. In other words, how do we interpret market information in a way where we keep our minds objective and neutral? Market gives me an edge, finds a risk, I take the trade. Edge, to find the risk, I take the trade. If you want trading to be more than that, then you probably don't want to be here. Because that's really all trading is. It ultimately becomes an exercise in just accumulating money based on your ability to objectively perceive an edge, define your risk, have a plan for taking profits. Trade either works or it doesn't. And you just keep on doing that over and over again.
I reconcile some of that with being an intuitive trader where you just, take the trades and come along.
You're way ahead. We'll get on that on Sunday. That's a good question, but where you just, this was basically just an introduction. So yeah, we're going to talk about trading intuitively. Remember I said I was going to put this into a context, trading mechanically, subjectively, and intuitively? We're definitely going to do that. But we definitely don't want to talk about that right now. That's way ahead of ourselves. Anything else? Does everybody have stereo headphones, stereo tape player and headphones? We're going to use them tomorrow. If not, you can buy a cheap one at a drugstore somewhere. Yes?
So we're bringing in Walkman tomorrow?
Yeah, bringing in a Walkman tomorrow. Right. Well, is everybody? Yes? Everybody got them? Okay, well, tomorrow morning.
7:30?
7:30. Well, 7:30 there'll be like a continental breakfast.
What time start?
We'll start around 8.
And do we need the tape players for?
I don't know yet. Well, I don't know. Okay, it'll be sometime, probably tomorrow afternoon sometime.
Is anyone coming in here tonight?
I think they're going to leave all the equipment. I think those are going to be locked. Yeah, I would say you'd be able to leave everything you want because you can make money without any skills. So when you say make money, yeah, that's great. But really, consistent money is a byproduct of the kind of skills you've acquired. And unfortunately, I say unfortunately because all these skills are mental. They're not physical skills. They're not muscle memory skills. It's not like you can hire a tennis coach or hire a golf coach and show you how, to make the proper swing and just practice at it over and over and over again. And eventually you'll get it in your muscle memory and be able to swing the racket correctly or swing your club correctly. But still, even with that, a consistently good score in golf is a function of what? What's going on in your brain? Because you can learn how to swing the club absolutely perfectly, but not do it every time. And the reason why you're not going to do it every time is because there are going to be distracting thoughts flowing through your brain, causing you to focus on something other than what you need to be focused on in that moment. And it's the same thing with trading. If you're focused on the money, then you're not focused on the skills you're trying to acquire. In other words, really what I want you to do is get to the point by Sunday afternoon and say to yourself, the only reason why I'm going to trade Monday morning, the only reason why I'm going to trade is to use my trading as a means or a vehicle to acquire certain mental skills. The skills that you know that will promote consistent results, or that will result in a consistently rising equity curve, or an equity curve that rises on a nice consistent basis. What did we learn yesterday? What sticks out in your mind? Beliefs, okay, but anything more specific? You don't need to know what's going to happen next. Good. However, that's a problem, isn't it? Why is that a problem? What is it about the way our minds are wired that caused that particular thought or notion, as Dave would say, to be a problem? Associations, exactly. Yeah. No, not only do we want to know what's going to happen next, our minds, by the way that they're wired, our minds are wired in a way. They're hardwired like the motherboard of a computer. Doesn't mean we can't change it. It just means that at the moment, until you do change it, until you do something specific that cause your mind to think differently, it will automatically and without any conscious thought on our part, meaning we don't have to think about this happening, it will happen automatically. If the now moment, which we've learned is unique, and why do we know it's unique? When these patterns, in other words, what we want to do is technical analysis helps us identify patterns in group human behavior. The patterns repeat themselves over and over and over again. The outcomes to the patterns, however, do not. And the reason why we know that the outcomes to the patterns don't repeat themselves, at least in relationship to the last trade or the trade before, is because there are always different people involved in the outcome of the pattern. So the pattern can look exactly the same, it can feel exactly the same, it can measure exactly the same, and because of those similarities, our minds will automatically associate what's happening in this now moment with something that's in our brain as a memory, and cause us to think as a result of that we know what is going to happen next, based on our memories, not on what's happening in the market in that moment, or what the market's potential to move is in that moment, or what the market might be telling us in that moment. This is an automatic process. We don't have to think about this happening. Automatic. Basically, what you have to do is render this process, this automatic mental process, kind of dysfunctional. Make it not function any longer. You can do that. The best traders at some point have, in one way or another. They may not have done it, systematically or methodically, the way that we're doing this now in this workshop. Usually it takes some emotionally catastrophic experiences for someone's mind to be wired differently, meaning that one of the consistent themes that runs through every great trader's life is that every single one of them usually has lost one or more fortunes before they got to the point where they became consistent. it's these kind of catastrophic, and it doesn't have to be Greg. Okay, that doesn't have to happen. Okay, I know that's what I was. Well, you know, you probably read a lot of stories and thinking, okay, when's that going to happen to me? It doesn't have to happen. What? Anyway, go ahead. What are you gonna say?
Well, the longer you read, a lot of us feel.
Mhm.
The longer you go over fields, you come with more baggage, patient on. Quote that your you know, the baggage that you work in other industries, they get longer.
Sense, doesn't it? When you think about it. I mean, let's put it this way: you take somebody who grows up in a trading family, whose father, let's say, trades, or his uncles or his brothers trade, and they understand, let's say, the inherent nature of what trading is all about. And one of the first things they teach them is, you know, let's say, especially in Chicago, where there are a lot of trading families, where there are generations of traders that trade on the floors of the futures exchanges. I mean, one of the first things they're going to teach them is that, you know, let's learn how to cut our losses. First, let's learn how to scratch trade, and then let's learn how to cut our losses.
Yeah.
And so, if you want, the first thing, if you understand, is okay, if an inherent part of being a successful trader is first learning how to cut a loss, then, you know, it probably won't take that long for you to learn how to do it. And all the, let's say, all the thinking implications that go with doing that, as opposed to coming from a situation where, you know, you're coming from a profession where you're expected to know what's going to happen next. You're relied upon to know what's going to happen next. And even if you don't know what's going to happen next, you can say and act like you do, and people are going to believe you anyway. Right? That's right, because that's what people want. And if you're wrong, it doesn't matter, because you can intimidate people to make them act like you're right. And that's one of the reasons why, well, it's also another reason why it is so difficult to adapt to the trading environment, because many of the skills that we learn to get what we want, in other words, to fulfill our expectations. Remember, we talked last night about expectations? An expectation is what we believe projected into some moment, some future moment in the environment. And when the environment shows up the way we expect, we all feel good. So one of the ways that we've assured ourselves of having our expectations fulfilled is through our superior social skills. And what do I mean by superior social skills? Getting ourselves into a position where we can control other people. Whether they agree with us or not, whether their beliefs are in harmony with what we want or not, if we can rise above, let's say, them in a way that cause us to have control over their behavior, then we can assure ourselves of getting what we want. Most of the people that gravitate towards trading that don't start out that way when they're, let's say, in their early 20s or something, or out of college, are professionals that come from those kinds of superior social skills and find it extremely difficult to adapt to the trading environment because of it. Because the market just is going to do what it's going to do. And there isn't a damn thing you're going to do about it until you can trade at a level that, you can basically cause prices to move in your direction. And even then, it's going to be difficult to make it happen for very long. And so the only thing you're going to find you have control over is the way you think. That's the only thing you're going to have control over. You can control the way you think. You can control how you perceive information. You can control, I'm going to say it again. You can control how you perceive information. But it's a completely different process. Now you're working inside yourself instead of working out there.
Yeah. You can control.
You can control the way you perceive information. And that's really what this workshop is all about. That's why we're going to talk about the nature of beliefs, because there is a mechanism by which we interpret environmental information. There has to be. if you look you look at the nature of the environment and the ways that it can express itself, the environment can express itself in a virtually infinite combination of ways. And yet we don't perceive all those ways in any given moment. And not only do we not perceive all the different ways that the environment can express itself, we can be standing virtually in the same position and looking at the same event and interpret it in completely different ways. Now, why is that possible? How is that possible? How can two people interpret the same event in different ways, completely different ways? And we've all been in these situations, the source of many of our most violent arguments. That's right, different belief. In other words, we're perceiving the situation from different beliefs, different perspective. In other words, different beliefs are operating on our perception of information in a way where the information is interpreted in a way that's consistent with the beliefs we're operating out of in that moment. So when I say we can control how we perceive information, we control that process by changing the beliefs we're operating out of. We operate out of different beliefs, and we're going to perceive the information differently. Because the problem is this association mechanism that I've been referring to causes us to think that we know what's going to happen next. In other words, if the moment is similar, I've got a pattern. Not only is it similar, it's virtually identical to the last one that showed up 5 minutes ago or 5 days ago or 2 hours ago. 2 hours ago, it was a winning trade. Now, if I let this association mechanism, influence the way that I think or how I see things, I'm automatically going to think that I know what's going to happen next. Automatically, without any conscious thought about it. And as a result of thinking that I know what's going to happen next, I will behave in a way that's consistent with what I think. And that behavior might, in fact, be a trading error. Remember the errors we put up yesterday? There's a list of all the things we can do, but those are the major things that we do that cause us to detract from our ability to create consistent results. So I may hesitate. I might not predefine my risk. I might not end up taking profits. There's any number of things I could end up doing because I think I know what's going to happen next. When the reality is, what's the reality? I don't know. For me to know what's going to happen next, really, now think about this. For me to know what's going to happen next, I would literally have to be able to read the minds of everyone who's participating and everyone who has the potential to participate, so that I would know how when they cast their vote by putting on a trade, you might say, how that's going to influence direction overall. And that's all it really is. It's just a guess. Whenever you're putting on a trade, it's just a guess. And the more you look at it that way, the less significance you'll put on any particular trade in a way by just knowing that really what you're doing is just kind of pulling the handle of a slot machine, but you've got the odds in your favor. You're the house. Because of technical analysis, you're the house. But only if you can execute properly every single time. That is the key. Execution without errors. Every error other than self-sabotaging beliefs, every error you're going to make as a trader will be the result of thinking that you know what's going to happen next. Every single error. And the problem is, sometimes you will. Sometimes you will think you know what's going to happen next, and it will come true. And sometimes it'll be 2 times in a row, and sometimes it'll be 3 times in a row. But I guarantee you, guaranteed, there's that trade out there with your number on it that's going to cause a catastrophic loss if you continue to think that you know what's going to happen next. Because again, I'm going to repeat, you can make money whether you don't make these errors or whether you do make these errors. You can make these errors and still find yourself in a winning trade. But if you want to create consistent results and not inflict psychological damage on yourself, then you're going to have to take your mind through a process that let's say renders this association mechanism dysfunctional or non-functional, not dysfunctional, but non-functional. You're going to have to keep your mind focused in the now moment, meaning what's the market telling me now about its potential to move in any particular direction based on the pattern that it's displaying in this moment. Not based on my memory of the previous trade or the one before that or the one before that, because this moment is truly unique. It may end up being exactly the same. But if you allow yourself to think that, you are putting yourself in a position where you have the potential to make errors. So are we kind of together about where we need to go with this? Where do we need to go? What do we need to learn right now? How to get rid of all the old thinking. Okay.
Make room for the educated guess.
All right, so you're just making educated guesses. And where would you say, kind of be more specific about about when you say get rid of all the old thinking? In other words, look at it this way. You guys, you're sitting here and you have this opportunity, let's say, to expose yourself to certain, let's say, categories or kinds of information. But what you end up exposing yourself to really is a function of your desire. Now think about this. It's really a function of your desire. What do you want to learn right now? What do you want to learn? Tell me what you want to learn.
I change my beliefs.
Okay, you want to learn how to change your beliefs. Great. Do you want to learn that, John?
No.
No? Okay, so there you go. What do you want to learn?
I want to know it's all right to take a loss rather than fear it.
Okay, and what do you think you have to do to learn that?
I mean, some of it's mechanical, some of it's knowledge based, but it gets back to that I know what it's going to do next. So I just sit there.
And so what do you think you're going to have to do to get to the point where, you know, it's
Back
all
to
right to
change-
take a loss?
Back to changing.
Oh, okay. Changing beliefs. Okay, good. Anybody else? What do you want to learn, Rick?
Well, back comments earlier, I don't think you can purge your mind of previous process. I think what we have to do is create switching points that make it track. Right.
Exactly. Yeah, because one of the things we're going to learn as we start discussing the nature of beliefs is that I don't think it's even possible to change a belief.
It's hard if you said a lot of the traders you talk to have blown up. I've been trading for 4 years and I've blown up twice big and, you make a lot, then you blow it up, then you make a lot, then you blow it up. Yeah, I think there's a certain point you reach where the pain is so strong that you do change your beliefs and it does get rewired.
Right.
In my previous career, I spent the whole time controlling and negotiating. I always liked it. When I was trading 2 years ago, I picked the biggest, baddest stock out there, not reverse it. I wanted to negotiate with that stock. And the more it went up, the more I'd put on because then I will beat it. And because that was what I did in my previous career. And eventually you get to such a level where the pain just, and it's not even just not even just financial. It's embarrassing because you got other traders like hell you do.
All right.
You know, it's that kind of stuff. And then you hit that point, and I think that's when you can finally switch and realize what you're talking about. But prior to that, it's hard.
Yeah.
Because you have to trust Warren.
Don't you get to a point of replacement though? I mean, isn't some of that when you're taking a loss, put yourself in a mental environment where if you were out of the trade, what the reward of that is?
I'm not sure if I know what you're getting at. When you say the word replacement, you're right. And when I said you're using the words, change of belief, what we're going to learn in terms of at least the way I look at it is that I don't think you can actually change the structure of a belief that once it exists, it'll be in our minds till the day we die. But what we can do is draw the energy out of it. What we're going to learn about the nature of beliefs is that they're basically energy structures, and that you can draw the energy out of a belief that let's say we find is non-functional or dysfunctional, or not non-functional, but it doesn't serve us. In other words, there are ways that it causes us to look at information and behave that doesn't serve our purposes. It doesn't serve our desires. And so what we can do is we can draw the energy out and replace it with another belief that we put energy into. But see, well, anyway, I'm going to get to that stuff later. But yeah, that's what you're doing is, so when you talk about replacement, so you can go ahead and now finish what you were
I
saying.
think that old track's always there, but you just indelibly superimpose the new track and look where after you are, like you say, you're always going to be.
Well,
constantly-
yeah, no, but see, no, Louis, no, here's the thing. The old track is always there, okay? However, you're going to learn how to do today and tomorrow is take the energy out of the old track so that it doesn't have any potential. So that there literally is no more potential for you to behave in that way, or for you to see or perceive in a way that's consistent with that belief. That's how you know you've really done the work, is when your thoughts are never drawn back to, or you don't feel compelled to behave in that old way. What's that?
Santa Claus belief.
Yeah, exactly. Right. I mean, and see, yeah, in the disciplined trader, it's the disciplined trader, trading in the zone. I'm not sure which. Trading in the zone. Okay. I don't know. Anyway, look at it this way. That's a perfect example. I mean, I'm sort of getting ahead of myself a little bit, but it's a perfect example. If you can draw the energy out of one belief, if it's possible to do it with just one, it's possible to do it with any. And a perfect example is, I grew up believing in Santa Claus. Now, do I believe in Santa Claus now?
Great.
What? Yeah, only want to trade, right. I wish. Now listen, can you say that I believe in Santa Claus now? We don't know you don't know me, well, I don't. Okay, but but that's a good answer. But here's what's really important about this, is that I would, in the course of my conversation with you, and the words that I would use, I would actually use words that don't really represent what's going on, just because that's the way we talk. So I would say, no, I don't believe in Santa Claus. But what we're going to learn in a little bit, as a matter of fact, when we get started with this, is that actually what I'm saying to you is that my belief in Santa Claus still exists in my mental system. There is a belief in my mental system that says Santa Claus exists. But I have another belief in my mental system that says that Santa Claus doesn't exist. It's a matter of which has the most energy. When I was 5 years old, the belief in Santa Claus had all the energy, and I didn't think any other possibilities existed. So therefore, if somehow or another I could transport myself back to that 5-year-old mentality, and somebody knocked on the door and said, Santa Claus, or all of us, for example, who grew up with that belief, and said, Santa Claus is out in the lobby, how would that belief act on my perception of that information and my behavior? What would happen? I would sprint to the lobby. My perception of the information would be that it's true, it's real, and the energy in that belief would cause me act on my behavior in a way where I would be jumping over you guys to get out into the lobby.
I don't think so. I think I might have just think, oh, yeah, it's
What's that?
to suddenly realize when you're in the guilt thing.
Yeah.
You are.
So
If you do that, prove that.
yeah, right. So now, if someone knocked on the door and said Santa Claus is in the lobby, how would I behave? How would I perceive the information?
You're right.
It would be irrelevant to me. And as a result of it being irrelevant, of me interpreting that information as irrelevant, how would it act on my behavior? I would just keep on standing here. I wouldn't change it. Now, these two beliefs are contradictory beliefs. They're two contradictory concepts that exist in my mental environment side by side, let's say. But there's no, from a functional perspective, there's no conflict. You see, from a functional perspective, I don't have a conflict at all because one has all the energy, the other one has virtually no energy at all. That's what we're going to end up doing. We're going to end up identifying those dysfunctional beliefs, in other words, that cause us to perceive market information in what? What do we want to do? We want to perceive market information or a lack of perceiving it from as threatening, right? Remember the up and down ticks? There, the up and down ticks, they're neutral, aren't they? From the market's perspective, it's just neutral information that form into patterns. The patterns give us an indication there's a higher probability of one thing happening over another. What causes us to perceive these up and down ticks in something other than a neutral frame of mind? Fears. Our fears are one.